I know it. Oh, now it is. See, Ron's getting sneaky back there. Okay. He's bringing up the words because I don't have the words for this song, but I think we all know it. It's Majesty. Does everybody know it? Okay. I mean, if you don't, where have you been hiding? You know? All right. Do you have it? No. He doesn't have it. Y'all look good. You can't bring it up. Okay. You can't get it? That's fine. That's fine. We can sing it. We can do it. I have faith in every one of y'all. All right, stand up for me. This is really, really hot. Okay. All right. Majesty, worship His majesty. Unto Jesus be all glory, honor, and praise. Majesty, kingdom, authority, flows from His own, His praise. Y'all know it better than I do. So exalt, lift up on high the name of Jesus. Magnify, come glorify Christ Jesus the King. Majesty, worship His majesty. Jesus who died, now glorified, King of all kings. Thank you.
You may be seated. Let me welcome you here once again this evening. My name is Chris Whitaker. I'm the lead pastor here at Waxhaw Baptist Church. It's great to see you. If you didn't join us this morning and you want to see the first part of Frank's presentation, you can pull up Waxhaw Baptist Church on Facebook, and you will be able to see it there. Tonight, he's going to finish up. He's going to give some time for some question and answering at the end of the presentation. We had a great time this morning in the Lord and in learning how to engage the culture that we live in. So it's my privilege this evening to welcome each and every one of you who was not here this morning. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Frank Turek. So let's welcome Frank.
People were here this morning or were somewhere else at the time? All right, how many of you are here right now? Okay, how many don't respond to surveys? Don't respond to surveys. 3 out of 10 don't respond to surveys. Okay, how many were not here this morning? Not here, didn't see it. Where were you? We can't go through the whole thing again. All right, here's what I'm going to do in the next few minutes, just kind of summarize what we did here this morning. We started out this morning talking about Petty Officer Michael Mansour, United States Navy SEAL, who in Ramadi, Iraq in September of 2006 literally sacrificed himself by diving on a grenade to save his 2 buddies that were lying at his feet. His parents were given the Medal of Honor, his Medal of Honor, by President Bush in April of 2008. And since then, he's had a stadium named after him and a United States Navy warship named after him, the USS Michael Mansour. In fact, it was in the, I was just out in San Diego a couple of months ago. It's sitting right there in the harbor in San Diego, the newest guided missile destroyer, the USS Michael Mansour. And we asked the question, Michael Monser, of course, died for his friends. Would anyone die for you? And we said the answer is yes, because someone already has died for you. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. And we said that the problem is a lot of people don't think Christianity's true. They think it's made up, it's invented. They think it's just written down by religious zealots who embellish the whole thing. And we said, actually, you can show Christianity's true. How do you show it's true? You simply try and answer these 4 questions. Does truth exist? Does God exist? Are miracles possible? And is the New Testament telling us the truth, particularly about the resurrection? And this morning, we started by going through this question right here. Does truth exist? Because if the answer is yes to all these questions, then Christianity's true. If the answer is no to any of these questions, then Christianity's false. Okay? And we started this morning by talking about truth, and we started with Jack Nicholson. Now, ladies and gentlemen, don't blow this like you did this morning, all right? Because those of you who are here, you blew it, all right? Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, "Colonel, I want the truth." And Nicholson said, "That's much better, much better." This is actually how he did say it. Now, this morning, a lot of you went, "You can't handle the truth." That's not right. Okay, this is the way you're supposed to say it, all right? And we said that there was this thinking skill you had to get good at using, and the thinking skill was turning a claim on itself. So when someone comes up to you and says there is no truth, you're going to turn the claim on itself and ask what question? Yeah, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth? Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true, right? And we said this thinking skill you got to get really good at using, because so many of the things you hear in our culture are literally self-defeating. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English to say there is no truth. And the thinking skill is to turn the claim on itself. What were some of the other ones we did this morning for those of you that were here? You remember? Yeah, my brother is an only child, right? That's obviously self-defeating, right? Or if somebody says there are no absolutes, right? What are you going to say? Is that an absolute? If somebody says you can't know anything, this is one we didn't do this morning, but you guys can get it. If somebody says you can't know anything, what are you going to say? Yeah, how do you know you can't know? Right? Somebody says you should doubt everything. What are you going to say? Yeah, should I doubt that? How about if somebody says there's no the truth, only my truth? Yeah, is that the truth? That there's only no the truths, but just my truth? I mean, that's a the truth statement saying there are no the truths, right? How about if somebody says you ought not judge? Yeah, then why are you judging me for judging, right? Everybody's judging. The only question is, are you judging rightly? So we went through all this morning, and the bottom line was after this section, we simply asked the question, can everybody see that this statement right here shoots itself? Can everyone see that, right? This is self-defeating. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English, which means that relativism and postmodernism, which are philosophies that say it's true that there is no truth, they can't be true. And isn't it amazing that many of our colleges are postmodern? They're teaching it's true, there's no truth. Ladies and gentlemen, why would you send your child, your young adult, to a college that's telling you it's true that there is no truth? You're spending $25,000, $50,000 a year to have them learn that? Why? It's false. All right? And we said that you can't get away from truth. Actually, you can, briefly, by just denying truth or going your own way, suppressing the truth. And there was a question I said that I normally ask atheists on a college campus. If they give me any pushback, I normally ask them a question. You guys remember what the question is? What is it? Yeah, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And many times they'll say no. Why? Because the problem isn't in the head, the problem's in the heart. They don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God because they want to be God of their own lives. And so whenever you ask that question, you get right to the bottom line quickly, right? I mean, you just learn whether or not they're open. And most of the time they're not. You ever notice when you're having a conversation with somebody or you're online doing something and they bring up an objection to Christianity and you begin to answer it? It's like they haven't even heard you. They're on to the next objection, right? And then the next objection. And the next, you go, whoa, you're not even interested, are you? It's not a head problem, it's a heart problem. So we pointed out truth does exist. Truth is what corresponds to reality. So the next question is it true that God exists? Because that's the key question we need to know now. And we're going to spend actually most of our time tonight on number 2. Okay? Because if you can establish that God exists, and then secondly, that Jesus rose from the dead, number 4, you can show that Christianity is true. And we said, okay, that was review. Now we're going new stuff. You guys ready? By the way, I'm going to, like I did this morning, I'm going to give you a phone number where you could text to get the entire PowerPoint presentation. So you don't have to try and keep up now, okay? Just sit back, and if you have a question, you might want to write it down. So at the end, we'll get to Q&A, all right? We said there are 3 arguments for the existence of God that we were going to look at. There's more than this, but these are just the 3 we're going to look at. The first argument is from the beginning of the universe, known as the cosmological argument. Cosmological comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. And it says if the universe had a beginning, then it must have had a beginner. Okay? The second argument is the argument from design, known as the teleological argument. Telos is a Greek word meaning design or purpose. It says if there's design in the universe and design in you, life, then there must be a designer. Now, these 2 arguments have some scientific evidence behind them. We'll see some of that here in a few minutes. The third argument doesn't have any science behind it. It's more philosophical in nature, yet it's the argument you've all intuitively known since you were very small children. It's the argument from morality known as the moral argument. And it says if there's one thing morally wrong out there, just one, like it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to murder 6 million people in a Holocaust, then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no standard beyond humanity, everything's just a matter of opinion. Well, that's just your opinion against the baby torturer's opinion. Or that's just your opinion against Hitler's opinion. Well, we know these things aren't just a matter of opinion. It's not just a matter of opinion that you don't murder 6 million people, right? That's really wrong. Well, if that's really wrong, there must be a standard outside of humanity that we're obligated to obey, and that standard is what we call God's nature. If God doesn't exist, murder is no worse than love. Not objectively, anyway. We'll get to that argument later. We got to start right here at the cosmological argument. Now, you got to admit, it was worth coming here tonight just to see God do that. Did you guys see that? I know some of you said, I've never seen God move. Oh, really? Check this out. Look at that. Now, this is the argument that many say points back to the big. Now, I know there's some Christians here going, Frank, you know, we're Christians in here, and we don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is so good that even atheists are admitting it. Stephen Hawking, who was probably the top physicist in the world until he died about 5 years ago. You might remember Hawking had ALS. He was kind of a medical miracle. Most people get ALS and die in a couple of years. This guy lived for like 40 years with it. In any event, he was an atheist, and here's what he said about the beginning of the universe. He said almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Now, Hawking tried to come up with another explanation other than God. He failed, but he's admitting the data, that space-time and matter literally came into existence. Now, it wasn't just Hawking who said this. An agnostic cosmologist by the name of Alexander Vilenkin, who now teaches at Tufts University, wrote a book about this, and he said this: with the proof now in place, cosmologists, by the way, a cosmologist is not someone that puts on your makeup, all right? This is somebody that studies the universe. Cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. 2 interesting words here. First interesting word, proof. Unusual for scientists to use the word proof. Why? Because science, by definition, is tentative. There's always new information coming in. And many scientific theories are overturned by new information. But Vilenkin sees so much evidence pointing to one conclusion, that the universe had a beginning, that he's ready to call it a proof. The other interesting word is the word problem. Why is it a problem that they have to face a cosmic beginning? Because what could have caused all of nature to come into existence? Can't be something in nature. Can't be a natural cause. It's got to be something outside of nature. Something we'd call supernature, beyond the natural. So Valenkin, by the way, is a guy that believes in the multiverse. Have you heard of the multiverse? That maybe there are other universes out there and ours just appears to be the one designed? Now, there's no evidence for this. This is just a way to avoid God, okay? But even he admits, even if there are other universes out there, the whole show needs an absolute beginning. Now, it seems to me if it needs an absolute beginning, it needs a beginner. Now, what is the evidence that's having just about every scientist now admitting the universe had a beginning? Philosophers admit it too. We don't have time to go through it. It's all in the book, chapter 3. And it's not controversial. Even atheists are admitting it. So we're just going to jump to the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. If the universe had a beginning, then it must have had a beginner. We've got two options. Either no one created something out of nothing, which is the atheistic view, or someone created something out of nothing, which is the theistic view. Now, here's my only question. Which view is more reasonable? What do you think? Yeah, number 2. I was at Texas A&M a number of years ago, and one atheist said, I think number 1's more reasonable. I said, number 1? Let's look at number 2 for a second. Number 2 says, someone created something out of nothing. Now, that's a miracle, right? But at least you got a miracle worker. You got someone. Number 1 is a miracle with no miracle worker. That's clearly absurd. In fact, I said to the audience at Texas A&M that night, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality. Oh, by the way, the law of causality doesn't say everything has a cause. The law of causality says everything that comes to be has a cause. There has to be an uncaused first cause. You can't go on an infinite regress of causes. There has to be something that has always existed. It's either the universe or something outside the universe, right? Anyway, I said to Texas A&M that night, yes, Shirley MacLaine, I said to the universe. I said to Texas A&M that night, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality, that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. There is nobody currently sitting here in this auditorium tonight who is currently worried that as you sit here, a hippopotamus has appeared out of nothing, by nothing, in your dorm room and is currently pooping on your pillow, right? You don't worry about that, right? You're not worried that a raging Bengal tiger is just going to appear right now here in the sanctuary and start devouring people. Why? Because you know that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. And if the atheists are saying the whole show could do so, the whole universe could pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause, then why doesn't everything do so? Why don't Teslas pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? You wake up one morning, you look outside, you see your Hyundai has turned into a Tesla. And you go, how do I charge this thing, right? Why don't MacBook Pros pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? Could have saved me $4,000 if I was just a little bit more patient. If you're hungry tonight after this little seminar here and you want to have a pizza, does it make sense to order one? Or should you just sit in your kitchen, wait, and hope one pops into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? No, it seems to me the atheists have all the faith. Do you realize that everyone believes in at least one miracle? Christians believe in more than one. We believe in this one and others. Atheists believe in one. They believe that no one created something out of nothing. At least many of them do. Now, which takes more faith? That someone created something out of nothing or that no one created something out of nothing? What do you think? Yeah, everybody. We can deal with who made God later during the Q&A. But here's a question to ask an atheist. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? In other words, if there is no God, why does anything exist? If there was no God, nothing would exist. Since you're here, God must exist. The only question is, who is he? All right? Now, if space, matter, and time had a beginning out of nothing, which is what everyone's admitting now, then what could have caused that? Well, whatever created space, time, and matter must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create, because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons make choices. The being would also have to be intelligent to have a mind to make a choice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? God. You say, how do you know it's the Christian God, Frank? We don't. Yet. We haven't done enough research yet. But if we keep going through these questions and we realize that Jesus rose from the dead, then we can conclude that the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,989 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. We haven't gotten there yet. I mean, this could be Allah. doing this, right? But it could also be Yahweh. We don't know yet. We got to keep going through the evidence. But so far, we got 6 attributes of this being. Okay, second argument for God, called the teleological argument, the design argument. And there's 2 aspects to this. The universe appears to be designed, and life appears to be designed. Let's look at the universe first. In recent decades, scientists have discovered the universe is fine-tuned. What does that mean? It means that there are a number of parameters about our universe, a number of attributes about it, that if you were to change any one of them, virtually imperceptibly, there would be no universe, or a universe that couldn't support life. For example, Stephen Hawking, again an atheist, put it this way. He said if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million, a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. If you change the expansion rate that infinitesimal amount from the very beginning, none of us are here. Now, you can't make any sort of evolutionary argument for this. You can't say, well, maybe it evolved to this point by chance. No, why? Because this was the initial starting point. It started there. It didn't evolve. It just happened. It started right where when the universe was created. It seems to me the same mind that created space, matter, and time is the same mind that made the expansion rate precisely what it needed to be. Also, the gravitational force, if it were altered by more than 1 part in 10 to the 40th power compared to the strong nuclear force, we wouldn't exist. What's 1 part in 10 to the 40th power? That's 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. You say, Frank, I can't get my head around that number. I know, neither can I. Let me give you an illustration. Stack the entire North American continent from the equator all the way to Greenland in dimes. All the way to the moon. That's what, 238,000 miles or something? And then do that on 1 billion other North American continents. And then take that one big pile of dimes, mark one of them red, mix it in that huge pile, blindfold a friend, throw him in, and have him randomly pick one of the dimes. The odds that he would pick that one dime that's red is 1 in 10 to the 40th power. Is he going to pick the red dime? No. That's the chance that this happened without any intelligence. And by the way, when scientists use the word chance, what does that mean? Is chance a cause? Who caused this? Chance. He was just here. No. Chance is not a cause. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. Chance doesn't do a thing. And yet scientists use the word chance as if it's causing something. Look, there's only 2 reasons that that value is where it is. It was either designed to be there or it wasn't. Which makes more sense? Somebody designed it to be there. Now, it's not just our universe that is designed. And by the way, I just showed you 2. There's at least a dozen of these. Change any one of them virtually imperceptibly, we're not here. Our solar system appears to be designed. Let's take a look at the solar system. Here we are, 3rd rock from the sun. If we were just a little bit closer to or a little bit further away from the sun, we couldn't survive. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It is. That's a lie. It's way too hot here in the summer. Axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly, we don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly, we don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us. Change that slightly, we don't exist. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we couldn't exist here on Earth. Why not? Does anyone know? Yeah, Jupiter's gravitational force is so strong that it attracts most of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. In fact, if you take a close-up look at Jupiter, these dark marks are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because if Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. Saturn does the same thing. You want to see the size of the planets? Check this out. There you got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. And what if Pluto identifies as a planet? What then? You bigots. Take a look at this. You can hardly see Pluto. Take a look at this. That's Arcturus. That's another star in our galaxy. Here's the sun. Jupiter is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Earth is invisible. Pluto, forget about it. All right? All right, keep an eye on Arcturus now. Where's Arcturus now? That's Antares. That's another star in our galaxy. The sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Jupiter is invisible. Earth, Pluto, forget about them. In fact, if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse here would be 5. Look, I don't name the stars, okay? Okay. If the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. The heavens are awesome. And that's just in our galaxy. And the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles, and all that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. Now, how far is 30 trillion miles? Far. It'll take you at least 2 tanks of gas and a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. A number of years ago, my wife and I took our sons out to the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona. If you ever get a chance to go to Tucson, on the south side of town, over the hill, they have this museum. And if you go there at night, on a clear night, you can see thousands of stars in the sky. So we're out there one night. This had to be 25 years ago. And the guide goes, wow, it's so clear tonight that if we look up at 9:03, we'll see the space shuttle in orbit. I said, oh, come on. We're not going to see the space shuttle in orbit. I mean, it's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guide goes, look! And about 70 degrees above the horizon, there's an object streaking across the western desert sky relative to us about like this. I mean, it's really cooking. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. Actually, what happened was, despite the fact that we were in total darkness, the space shuttle was so high up that the sun was still reflecting off of it, and when it got out of the range of the sun, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle was in orbit, the space shuttle was traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to work in the morning? Take the space shuttle. 5 miles a second. Think about how fast that is. Well, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle and go from our star, the sun, to another star, an average distance away in our galaxy, 30 trillion miles. In other words, how long would it take us to go 30 trillion miles if we could go 5 miles per second? How long do you think it would take us? Long time. You must be a math major. Yeah. It would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got in the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started traveling from our star, the sun, to another star inside our galaxy an average distance away, you've been going 5 miles a second for 2,000 years. You would be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. And we're going to explore space. No, we're not. We're not going anywhere in space. We can hardly get out of our solar system. You know, it took us 9 years to get to Pluto. Think about this. If our solar system is the size of a quarter with Pluto on the outer rim and the sun in the center, do you know where the next nearest star is? It's 2 football fields away. And it took us 9 years to get to the rim of the quarter. Forget about it. We're not going anywhere in space. It's too far. And it's too dangerous. In fact, imagine we go light speed. You know what light speed is? 186,000 miles per second. At light speed, 186,000 miles per second. That's like going around the Earth like almost 8 times in a second. It would take us almost 4 years to get to the next nearest star. But imagine we can do that someday. In fact, what I'm about to show you now is a little bit disturbing, but since you're a mature audience, I'm going to show it to you anyway. Imagine we get to another planetary system, we plant our flag, and then this happens. heavens are not for astronauts, ladies and gentlemen. Now, to show you how analytical, I knew you were a mature audience. To show you how analytical my wife is, when I showed her that video for the first time, she smiled just a little bit, and then she said, "That's illogical. There's no sound in space." Now, notice what the psalmist says about God's love for us. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As high as the heavens are above the earth. How high are the heavens above the earth? I mean, if it's going to take us 200,000 years just to get to another star in our galaxy, how high are the heavens really above the earth? I mean, in fact, how many stars are there in the entire universe? Well, the Hubble Space Telescope helped us discover that. I don't know if you can see the bottom of this. See these mountains down here? Okay, this is a picture of the southern hemisphere. And a number of years ago, they trained the Hubble Space Telescope on 1/26 millionth of the sky for about 11 days of exposure time. What's 1/26 millionth of the sky? Go outside tonight, put a piece of rice on the end of your finger, hold it up. That piece of rice represents about 1/26 millionth of the sky. So Hubble Ultra Deep Field, that's what this is called. You can Google this. What I'm about to show you is in the public domain, so you can watch it again if you want. Hubble Ultra Deep Field is Hubble looking at this 1/26 millionth of the sky. They did this, and I'm about to show you what they found. They put this little video together. There's no audio, it's just video. Okay? When I play this, you're going to see the constellations come up, and then Hubble's going to zoom out to 1/26 millionth of the sky. You guys ready? You guys ready? Okay, here's what Hubble found. There are the constellations. Now let's go see what they found. What you're looking at are nearly 10,000 galaxies in 1/26 millionth of the sky. Each one of these galaxies supposedly has billions of stars, each one of them. So how many stars are there in the entire universe? I mean, if you can find 10,000 galaxies in 1/26 millionth of the sky, how many stars are there in the whole universe? The number of stars in the entire universe are about equivalent to the number of grains of sand on all the beaches, on all the earth, times 100,000. And to go from one star to another star, going 5 miles a second, will take you over 200,000 years, just in our galaxy. The heavens are awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, I never want to hear anybody ever again use the word awesome unless you're talking about God or the heavens. Awesome shot, dude. Awesome shirt, dude. Awesome TikTok video. No! What are you going to say for God? I mean, now you know why the heavens declare the glory of God. Now, a minute ago, I just showed you part of the Psalm 103 verse. Here's the entire verse. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgressions from us. The heavens are supposed to give us an idea of what God is like, because everything else in our experience is finite, limited. But the heavens appear virtually infinite, unlimited. When you consider stars equivalent to sand grains on 100,000 Earths, and it's going to take you over 200,000 years at 5 miles a second just to go between two of them, you get an idea of what infinity means. Here's the problem. If this is going to represent God's nature, and it is, that means he's infinitely just. That's a problem, isn't it? Because none of us have been just. We've all been unjust or unjust at times, haven't we? And if he's infinitely just, what does he have to do? He has to punish us. Otherwise, he wouldn't be infinitely just. Yet he's also infinitely loving, thankfully. So he doesn't want to punish us. So what does he do instead? He finds an innocent substitute who hasn't sinned himself. Where can he find such a person? Not in any one of us. He has to come to earth, add humanity to his deity, live the perfect life, and then allow the creatures that rebelled against him to kill him so he could take their punishment on himself. He's the only place you can find an innocent substitute. So when Christianity says Jesus is the only way, when he says, I'm the only way, it's not an arbitrary claim. He's not just saying, well, because I'm God, I said so. No, that's the only way you can reconcile infinite justice and infinite love. Someone has to pay the price. Jesus does. Now, when you think about a universe that has stars equivalent to sand grains on 100,000 Earths, and that's representing God's nature, and then God comes and he dies and he pays the punishment for us. But when you look at the universe that's that vast, does that make you feel insignificant? It shouldn't. Why? Because as amazing as the heavens are, they're not made in the image of God, but you are. In fact, God wouldn't have made the heavens unless he had made you. In fact, this is you in the womb at 11 weeks. Question, is this animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? It's human, right? Now here's the second part of this design argument. Not only are the heavens designed, but your design. In fact, let's go back even further than 11 weeks. Let's go all the way back to when your mother and your father got together to conceive you. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. I also see some older people in here, so I'll try and be discreet as well, just in case you've forgotten how this works. Okay? When your mother and father got together to conceive you, your mother unconsciously perfumed her egg to attract your father, and then your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race. And you won. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limping here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool, but you were. Now, your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the 3.5 billion letter software program, your genome, your DNA, that makes you you. In fact, that software program, all the letters are in the right order. By the way, where do programs come from? Programmers, right? And your egg, which was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, contained the other half of the 3.5 billion letter software program that makes you you. And when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. You know, you have not received any more genetic information from this point till right now. Your genetic information has just duplicated itself. In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, wait a minute, Frank. You can't legislate morality. All right, no extra charge for this. This was the subject of our first book that Chris mentioned this morning, Legislating Morality. All laws legislate morality. Every law declares one behavior right and opposite behavior wrong. You can't think of a law that doesn't legislate morality. And when people say, don't impose your morality on me, I normally say, why not? Would that be immoral? And actually, what are they doing when they say that? They're imposing their morality on you. They're saying you ought not impose ought nots, right? Well, why are you imposing that ought not on me? Actually, there's a better answer. When somebody says, don't impose your morals on me, you ought to say, these aren't my morals. I didn't make this stuff up. I didn't make up the fact that murder's wrong, that abortion's wrong, that rape is wrong, that theft is wrong, that men are made for women and women were made for men, and the best way to perpetuate and stabilize society, which is the reason the government's involved in marriage to begin with, is to legally recognize that man-woman relationship over every other relationship. I didn't make any of this stuff up. This isn't my morality. This isn't your morality. This just happens to be the morality. The one Thomas Jefferson said was self-evident. The one the Apostle Paul said, the Gentiles who are not of the law have the law written on their hearts. Look, if you have a problem with the morality, you don't have a problem with me. I didn't make it up. You have a problem with the Creator upon whose nature this morality is derived. All right, no extra charge for that. Let's go back to this. From this point till right now, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second. For most of you anyway. Some cells became brain cells, others heart cells, others lung cells. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this day. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4. Knock it off. I mean, how is this happening? Are you thinking about this? Are you going, wait a minute, Frank, time out. I got to concentrate. New red blood cells coming up. No. This is just happening. Why is it happening? Well, Aristotle noticed something 2,400 years ago. Of course, he didn't know anything about blood cells, but he did notice that all of nature is going in a direction. For example, why does an acorn, if it's properly nourished, always go in the direction of becoming an oak tree? Why doesn't it become an elm tree or a birch tree or a seahorse? You say, well, it's programmed to become an oak tree. Well, who programmed it? And by the way, is an acorn conscious? Is an acorn in the ground going, all right, what do I have to do to become an oak tree? No. But it reliably goes in the direction of becoming an oak tree. If it doesn't have a mind of its own, and it doesn't, yet it reliably goes in a direction, there must be an external mind directing it toward an end. That is what Aristotle called the unmoved mover. Thomas Aquinas came along in the 1200s AD and he said, this is going to be my fifth way to argue for God, that all of nature is going in a direction. If it's going in a direction, there must be some kind of director out there. Now notice, this argument for God is not a Big Bang argument. It's not a way back when somebody created the universe. That's a different argument. This argument says that every single second the universe exists, somebody is keeping it going. In fact, God is to the universe what a band is to music. If a band were up here playing the music, the band would be creating and sustaining the music, right? What would happen to the music the second the band stopped playing? Music be over. Same thing is true with God. God creates the universe and the natural laws that govern it, and he creates you, and then he sustains the universe, the natural laws that govern it, and he sustains you every single second. If he were to pull his hand away, we'd all go out of existence. This is why Paul comes along and he says, in him, in Jesus, we live and move and have our being. And he says, Christ holds all things together. And the writer of Hebrews says, God sustains all things by his powerful word. So God is doing this every single second. I think this is a powerful argument for God. In fact, that's why we can do science. Why can we do science? Because nature's orderly. It does the same thing over and over again. You ever ask yourself, why is everything so orderly? Why is it so consistent and persistent? Because there's an orderer. That's why. If he were to pull his hand away, we'd go out of existence. Now, there's a lot more in the book, particularly the Stealing from God book on that. But some of you are going, Frank, you got the atheists have to have better arguments than to counter this, don't they? Actually, they don't. And I want to show you something. Has anyone ever heard of this guy, Lawrence Krauss? This guy is a physicist who taught at Arizona State. And he wrote a book like 10 years ago called A Universe from Nothing, where he tries to say how the universe came into existence out of nothing by nothing. No need for God. There's just one problem. His definition of nothing is not nothing, it's actually something. He talks about a quantum vacuum. He talks about the laws of gravity, the laws of quantum mechanics. They're not nothing. And I critiqued his book in my book, Stealing from God, but somebody else who also critiqued him was, believe it or not, Stephen Colbert, the guy who's now on, what show is it? Tonight Show? Whatever it's called, on CBS. Well, before he did this, he was on the Daily or the Comedy Central doing the Colbert Report, right? And he had this guy on TV to talk about his book. And he did such a good job that I want to show it to you. It's only 5 minutes long. And Colbert is going to ask Krauss some questions about what is nothing. And notice when Krauss starts talking about nothing, he actually starts talking about something. He starts talking about the laws of quantum mechanics, the laws of gravity, these kind of things. Well, that's not nothing. And Colbert takes him to task on it. All right? You can find this on YouTube. You ready? All right, here we go. Check this out. The fact that the universe is more remarkable than the fairy tales that were talked about by Bronze Age illiterate peasants before we knew the earth formed.
So you believe there's no God?
I don't even use the word believe. The point is
There is no God.
there's no need for God.
Is there God? Is there God? What would you say?
There's no evidence for God.
Okay,
There's
so
no evidence for God.
let me ask something. If there is no God, okay, if there is anything called God, if he can't something come from him?
It clipped out there, but he said, if God is nothing, can't something come from him? So you can see this is really sophistry. Notice that Krauss says that space-time and matter can come into existence as long as you start with space-time and matter. Well, duh, you're not creating it out of nothing. Also, he says there's no evidence for God. We just went through some of it. But if someone were to say there's no evidence for God, what question would you ask them? Well, what evidence would you need to see, right? But sometimes the question I like to ask is this: why is there evidence for anything? Why is there evidence for anything? Because this is a rational world. That's why, an orderly world, where we can ascertain truths about the real world and draw conclusions about it. That's better explained by theism, meaning God exists, than nothing intelligent exists. And also, in another context, he said, I celebrate there's no God. Now, why would you celebrate there's no God? Now he's really revealing his hand. He says, in fact, he doesn't say I'm an atheist. You know what he says? I'm an anti-theist. Meaning what? I'm against God. I don't want God to exist. Why? Because he wants to be God over his own life. So just to go to show you, this even a comedy host, a comedian can see through this kind of stuff. And yet there are people that actually believe it. All right, so let's briefly go to our third argument for the existence of God. And that third argument is the moral argument for God. Now, let's start by asking this question. How do you know that your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing an interception? Men, he's talking about football, and you guys don't want to participate? I mean, come on. Not just the results. What do you have to know? Not just the rules. Huh? How? Yeah, how are they playing the game? The goal of the game. You got to know the purpose of the game, right? If you know the purpose of the game, then you can say, well, my guy throwing a touchdown is getting me closer to the purpose, so it's a good play. But my guy throwing an interception is taking me further away from the purpose, so it's a bad play. If there's no purpose, you can't say this is a good play, this is a bad play, right? You've got to have purpose. Now, notice in football that the purpose of the game comes from outside the game, right? When teams show up to play football, the field's already set, the rules are already made, everybody knows what the purpose is, they know the rules. Where do they come from? They come from the commissioner and the owners, and every once in a while they get together and they tweak the rules a little bit, right? Now, the rules of football are arbitrary. They could be different, but the rules of life are not arbitrary. They do come from outside the game. They come from outside life. And if there is no purpose to life, you can't say, well, here's the right way to live it, and here's the wrong way to live it. You got to have purpose to know this is good and this is bad. Only if God exists can you say this is good and this is bad in an objective way. By the way, what is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to know God and to make him known. Not just know him intellectually, but to know him personally. For those who are here this morning, the difference between belief that and belief in, right? Even the demons know that God exists, but they don't trust in him. There's a difference. Now, if there is no God, if there's no purpose, then the Nazis were not wrong. In fact, I had a debate a number of years ago with the head of the American Atheists. His name was David Silverman. He was Jewish, but he was an atheist. And at one point in the debate, I said to him, look, if there's no God, the Holocaust wasn't wrong. And he avoided that. He avoided it. I kept pressing him on it. He finally said, Frank, you're right. The Holocaust wasn't wrong. And I said to him, David, you're Jewish. I mean, and you know the Holocaust was really wrong. If you have a worldview that's telling you that the Holocaust wasn't wrong, you've got the wrong worldview. You need a new worldview. Welcome to theism. Welcome to God. If there is no God, love is no better than rape. Oh, you might like love better, but that's just your preference. If there is no God, there are no human rights. You know, in our country, we seem to be creating rights every 10 minutes. You notice that? But many of the people out there claiming they have a right to this and a right to that are atheists. Do you realize if atheism is true, there's no right to anything? There's not only no right to abortion, there's no right to life. There's not only no right to same-sex marriage, there's no right to natural marriage. There's no right to anything unless God exists. Now, if he does exist, do you think he wants us to kill our children? No. Do you think he wants us to go against the design that he put in us and not procreate and to have relations with the same sex? No. But without God, there's no right to anything. In fact, murder, slavery, and racism are not wrong unless God exists. You may not like those things, but that's just your preference. There's no standard beyond you if there's no God. Who are you to say what's right and wrong? That's just your opinion. If there is no God, religious people have never done anything wrong. And we know the people who are atheists out there are going to claim you're hypocrites and you've done evil. And, whoa, what do you mean by evil? There's no evil unless God exists. In fact, we'll get to that in a minute. Tolerance is no better than intolerance if there is no God. Now, ladies and gentlemen, are Christians commanded to be tolerant? No, what are we commanded to be? Loving, right? Tolerance is too weak. Tolerance says hold your nose and put up with them. Love says reach out and help them. And how do you help people? You don't always approve of what they do. You see, our culture thinks that love means approval. If you love me, you'll approve of what I do. Is that love? How many parents do we have in here? All right, how many former children do we have in here? Okay, that's everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, if your parent approved of everything you wanted to do as a child, was that parent loving or unloving? Unloving, right? You can't approve of everything your kid wants to do. You need to stand in the way of evil and say, no, I love you too much. I'm going to prevent you from doing that. Notice Paul says, love always protects. Love rejoices in the truth. Love always perseveres. Love doesn't give in and enable people. The amazing economist Thomas Sowell, who grew up in Harlem, originally born in Gastonia, but grew up in Harlem, and worked his way up to the point where he was teaching at some of the top universities in the world. He's 92 years old now. You know what he said recently, not long ago? He said, when you tell people what they need to hear, you're helping them. When you tell people what they want to hear, you're helping yourself. Why do we tell people what they want to hear? Because we don't want them mad at us, right? So what are we doing? We're helping ourselves. We're not helping them. We're enabling them. You want to love somebody? You need to tell them the truth in as palatable a way as you can. But you need to tell them. Otherwise, you're just an enabler. You're not loving. You're unloving. And if there is no God, you can't complain about the problem of evil. Why? Because evil doesn't exist unless good exists. But good doesn't exist unless God exists. You say, how can this be? Look, C.S. Lewis many years ago had he was an atheist because he came out of World War II. He said there's too much injustice in the world, too much injustice. He said there can't be a good God. And then one day he had an epiphany. He realized the argument didn't work. His argument for evil actually showed God did exist. And he ultimately wrote it in the book Mere Christianity. Here's what he said. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? You see, you wouldn't know what a crooked line was unless you knew what a straight line was. You wouldn't know what injustice was unless you knew what justice was. Something can't be immoral unless something is, right? You can only know it against the backdrop of good. Because evil does not exist on its own. Evil only exists as a lack in a good thing. In other words, evil is a parasite. Evil is like cancer. If you take all the cancer out of a body, you got a better body, right? What happens if you take all the body out of the cancer? It doesn't exist. See, evil can't exist on its own. Evil is like rust in a car. If you take all the rust out of a car, you got a better car. What happens if you take all the car out of the rust? You got a Pinto. Right? No, it doesn't exist on its own. It only exists as a lack in a good thing. So if evil exists, and we all know it does, then good exists. But good only exists if God exists. So evil doesn't disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there, but it doesn't disprove God, because there'd be no such thing as evil unless there was good, and there'd be no such thing as good unless God existed. In fact, you could put it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you got to have sunshine. In other words, in order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have sunshine without shadows. You can have good without evil, but you can't have shadows without sunshine. You can't have evil without good. Now, I know this is going to sound counterintuitive, but it's true. If evil exists, and we all know it does, then God exists. Not because God is doing evil, but because he's the standard by which we'd even know what evil was. And you can ask the question, why would God allow certain evils? We could talk about that later. But it doesn't disprove God. So Christopher Hitchens, I don't know if you remember him. I had a couple of debates with this. This is a picture from our second debate a number of years ago. He was a brilliant British atheist who sounded more brilliant than he was because he had a British accent. And he wrote a book called God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. You know, this word poison is just a nice way of saying religion's evil. So I kept asking him, what's your standard of good by which you'd even know what evil was? You know, I said, Christopher, a lot of what you say in your book is true, because it talks about how religious people have done evil. He's right. We have done evil, but that doesn't disprove God. In fact, it shows God does exist, because there would be no evil unless God existed, because he's the standard of good by which we'd even know that. And I said to him, Christopher, I can't live up to the standard that God asked me to live up to, that Christ asked me to live up to. In fact, I said to him, religion does not poison everything. Everything poisons religion. I poison religion because I don't live up to the pure words of Christ. So in the second debate, I said to him, Christopher, I'm a hypocrite. I can't live up to what Jesus told me to do. But if I could, I wouldn't need him. If I was perfect, I wouldn't need a Savior. So when people say, hey, Frank, I can't go to church because there's too many hypocrites down there, I always say, come on down, pal. We got room for one more. Look, we got a whole row right here. Yeah, we're all hypocrites. The church is a hospital for sinners. It's not a country club for saints. We're all fallen, and you ought to expect people to be fallen. Now, you hope they're making progress to be more and more like Jesus, to be conformed to the image of his Son. But to say that we're going to be perfect is ridiculous. We're not. Now, what can we learn? There's much more in the books on the moral argument, but what can we learn from these three arguments? From the cosmological argument, we can learn that the cause of the universe is spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, and intelligent. From the teleological argument, we get more information that he's intelligent, and we also see that he sustains the universe. From the moral argument, we can see that this being is also moral. He's got a moral standard. So from these three arguments together, what do we get? We get a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things. Now, this is the God of the Bible, and we haven't even opened the Bible yet. You see, this is called natural theology. You don't need the Bible to know God exists. You don't know it's Jesus. You don't know he's Jesus, but you know you've got a cause, a being with these attributes. So how are we going to discover who the God of the universe is? We'll get to it in just a second, but before we do, I got to show you something from C.S. Lewis. Because C.S. Lewis said that something that I can't say any better. I'm just going to show you what he said, because some people will say, well, atheists have arguments against this. They don't have good ones. We just saw one of the ones that wasn't good from Lawrence Krauss, right? But you know, most atheists today are materialists. What does that mean? They believe that you're just a molecular machine, because you don't have a soul, you just have a body. You don't have a mind, you just have a brain, which means you don't have free will, because every thought you have is driven into your head or comes from the laws of physics. You don't have free will. You're a molecular machine. You're a moist robot, okay, according to most atheists today. Here's what Lewis says about this. And I think this defeats the whole view. Here's what he says. Check this out. Suppose there were no intelligence behind the universe. In that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. Thought is merely the byproduct of some atoms within my skull. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? But if I can't trust my own thinking, of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism, and therefore have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I can't believe in thought, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. Boom. As John Madden would say, right? You can't say it any better than that. Atheists are stealing from God while they argue against him. They shouldn't be able to think if there's no God. They shouldn't have thought. They shouldn't have free will. So that's what the book Stealing from God is about, all right? Now, how are we going to discover who the true God is? For that, we got to go to question 3. And you're probably looking at your watch going, Frank, how are we going to do this? We don't have a lot of time left. Well, 3 is easy, okay? We can show you that miracles are possible if God exists. Now, what is the purpose of a miracle? Usually in the Bible, the purpose of a miracle is to say that so-and-so speaks for God. Why are people going to follow Moses? Because Moses can do miracles. Why are people going to follow Elijah and Elijah? Because they can do miracles. How about Jesus and the apostles? Because they can do miracles. Now, there aren't a lot of miracles actually in the Bible. You say, oh, they're happening all the time. No, they're not. There's periods in the Bible where there's hundreds of years, no miracles. Okay? They happen around certain people because these people have new revelation that needs new confirmation. Now, here's the problem. A lot of people today think miracles are impossible. For example, Noah and the ark. All right, Christians, can we just keep this among ourselves? Can we all agree on one thing? Noah and the ark is crazy. Thank you. It is. And resurrections. How many people have seen a resurrection? I asked you guys this morning. Nobody has. Yet for us to be Christians, we have to believe something we've never seen. And for some reason, the big problem miracle in the Bible is Jonah. Is that a whale of a tale or a tale of a whale? And what is the deal with Jonah? Can you actually believe in Jonah? Well, ladies and gentlemen, what is the greatest miracle in the Bible? No, it's not the resurrection. The resurrection's easy compared to the greatest miracle. The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least possible, right? I mean, if it's true that God created the universe out of nothing, can he do whatever he wants that's not logically impossible inside the universe? Of course. Well, here's the interesting thing. Remember we talked about this already? Even atheists are admitting the evidence for the first verse. Now, they don't think it was God, but what else could it be if space-time and matter had a beginning out of nothing? And if God can create the universe out of nothing, can he do any of these other miracles? Of course Noah's crazy, unless God exists. Of course resurrections don't happen, unless God exists. Of course Jonah's a fairy tale, unless God exists. We already have evidence that God exists. So these are possible. Now, a couple more things about miracles we need to talk about. One is, a lot of people won't believe in miracles because they've never seen one. That's not a good reason to disbelieve something necessarily. Why? Because you believe in a lot of things you've never seen. You believe in your mind. Have you ever seen it? You're using it right now. You believe in the laws of logic, laws of mathematics. You ever seen those? You're using them right now. You believe in love. Have you ever seen love? I mean, it's not a physical thing you see. You may have loved somebody or been loved, but you've never seen love. It's not a physical thing. In fact, in one of the debates with Christopher Hitchens, one student from the audience during the Q&A in the debate said, Christopher, what is love? And Christopher, being a materialist, had to come up with some sort of physical description of love. So he said, love is a chemical. And I said, don't tell that to your wife. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? Because I got the chemical today. You know, tomorrow I might not have it, but today I got it. It's not a chemical. It's an immaterial reality, an immaterial virtue grounded in the nature of God. You've never seen it, yet you believe in it. You've never seen gravity. Oh, Frank, come on. There's gravity right there. Nope, you're not seeing it. What are you seeing? You're seeing the effects of gravity. We really don't even know what gravity is. Did you know that? We don't even know what it is. We can see its effects. And that's how you know God exists. If somebody ever asks you, how do you know God exists? What you ought to say is, I know God by his effects. If there's a creation, and there is, that's an effect. We're reasoning back to a cause, a creator. If there's design, and there is, that's an effect. We're reasoning back to a cause, a designer. If there's a moral law written on our hearts, that's the effect. We're reasoning back to a cause, a moral lawgiver. If we have the ability to know right and wrong, and we can ascertain truths outside of our skull, we have this ability to think, and we have these laws of logic, that's the effect. We're reasoning back to a cause, a mind. If we see, as we'll see here in a few minutes, a man actually rose from the dead after predicting it, that's the effect. We're reasoning back to a cause, a God who has power over life. So you're reasoning from effect to cause. Who does that, by the way? That's what scientists do. Scientists are trying to discover what caused particular effects. That's what you're doing. And the queen of all sciences, what is it? It's not physics, it's theology. Because theology takes into account every branch of academic inquiry, including physics. So we're reasoning from effect to cause. You've never seen George Washington, yet you believe he existed. Why? Because he's left effects behind that are best explained by a cause known as George Washington. And you've never seen Jesus, probably. Some people say they have, but I haven't seen him, yet I believe in him. Why? Because he's left effects behind that are best explained by Jesus of Nazareth. One other thing about miracles we need to talk about. Well, do miracles have to occur today for Christianity to be true? No. But I believe miracles do occur today. In fact, Craig Keener, who is a brilliant researcher, teaches at Asbury Seminary out in Kentucky, a number of years ago wrote a hernia-inducing 2-volume set, over 1,100 pages, about modern-day miracles. But look, even if Keener's wrong, if there's been no miracles since Jesus and the apostles, Christianity is still true. Do you know what's harder to believe? If you're an atheist, you have to believe that every single spiritual experience and miracle claim in the history of the world has been mistaken. Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. Is that reasonable to believe? No, I don't think. Everyone's wrong? Now, one last thing about miracles. Miracles have to be rare if they're going to get our attention. In other words, you shouldn't expect to see a lot of miracles, even if they do occur today. Why? Because if they happened all the time, we'd go, hey, this stuff happens all the time. It's no big deal. I mean, imagine if resurrections occurred routinely. What would the resurrection of Christ mean? You know, you go to somebody, you go, Jesus rose from the dead to prove he was God. And the guy goes, so what? Uncle George just rose from the dead 2 weeks ago. Now I got to give the inheritance back, right? No. It's got to be a rare event. It can't be a regular event. Miracles have to be rare. And they are. In fact, you know, there are things that happen every day. And since they happen every day, we don't call them miracles. But we should know there's a mind behind it. Like how many people in here have ever seen your own flesh and blood born? Every mother and every father who was in the room at the time. Now, when you see another human being that you helped create come out of that baby's mom, when you see that baby, your own flesh and blood, come out of somebody else, you don't go, evolution, right? You go, this is amazing. How did this, we made Whoopi 9 months ago, and now, but look at what, how did this happen, right? We don't call it a miracle, but it happens every day, and that's why we don't call it a miracle. But we know there's a mind behind it. It doesn't just happen. So miracles are possible if God exists. The only question we need to answer now, since we know that truth exists, God exists, and miracles are possible, is the New Testament telling us the truth about the central miracle in the New Testament, which is the resurrection of Jesus. Now, I've got 10 reasons why we do. We don't have time for 10. We're just going to look at 2, okay? All the rest are in the books, okay, if you want to go further. 2 reasons why the New Testament writers are telling the truth. They're not inventing this. The first reason is something called embarrassing stories. Embarrassing stories. What's that about? Historians know that if they're looking at a given text and it's embarrassing to the author or authors, it's probably true. Why? Because you're not going to invent things that make you look bad. You're not going to invent things that embarrass you. You might invent things that make you look good, right? But you're not going to invent things that make you look bad. In fact, let me just ask you guys a question right now. How many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look good? If you don't have your hand up right now, you're lying to make yourself look good. And it's not working. We know you're lying. All right. How many people have ever lied to make yourself look bad, to embarrass yourself? You don't do that, right? You might lie to make yourself look good. You won't lie to make yourself look bad or embarrass you. Well, the New Testament writers, by the way, this is true of the Old Testament as well, but we're just looking at the New Testament. The New Testament writers have filled the text with embarrassing details and stories they never would have invented. That's why we call this the duh factor. They're not making this up. Let me just give you a few of them. Notice their leader, Peter, is called Satan by Jesus. Do you think they made this up? You think Mark, who wrote this down, at one point said to Peter, hey, Pete, I'm going to make this a real interesting story. I'm going to have the Lord call you Satan. What do you think Peter would have said? Have him call you Satan. Look, I'm the leader here. This doesn't look good. And then Peter says, Lord, I'll never deny you. What does he wind up doing? He denies him 3 times. That's embarrassing. And then at the crucifixion, all the disciples, maybe with the exception of one, they all run away. This is like a Monty Python movie. Run away. They all run. And who are the brave ones? Ladies, who? The women. The women are the brave ones. Now, who wrote the New Testament down? Men. Now, what man is going to invent that he was hiding for fear of the Jews, why the women went down and discovered the empty tomb? Would any man in here invent that? I mean, if I was there and I wanted to invent it, I'd make myself look good, wouldn't you? I mean, I'd write down something like this. Let's see, we marched right down there and we overpowered that elite Roman guard. That sounds pretty good. What do you think? Yep. John said, get out. Peter roundhouse kicked him. Thomas said, we'll be back. No doubt. And then on Sunday morning, we marched right down to the tomb, and we saw Jesus, who congratulated us on our great faith. And then we went and comforted the trembling women. I would never say it was Mr. Sissy Pants why the women went down and discovered the empty tomb. And oh, by the way, why would you never say the women were the first witnesses? Forget the fact it was embarrassing to men. It was. Independent of that, why would you never say the women were the first witnesses? That's right, yes, because their testimony was not trusted as a man's was. So if you're making up the New Testament story of the resurrection, you'd only have the men be the first witnesses. Yet all 4 Gospels say the women were the first witnesses, which is telling us what? They really were. In fact, one of the women who was a witness was a formerly demon-possessed woman. Oh, wow, she's credible, isn't she? No, they're not making this up. I actually had a woman come up to me once. She said, Frank, I know why Jesus appeared to the women first. I said, why? And she said, because he wanted to get the story out. I said, that is an excellent point. Because ladies, when your man comes home from work, does he say much? There could have been a nuclear explosion down at the plant. He's not going to tell you. You'll see it on the news before you hear it from him. You'll be watching the news going, hey, hon, what happened? Oh, yeah, forgot to tell you. The nuke blew up. I've been hot for 3 days. What's for dinner? Right? He's not going to tell you. I can't even believe this next verse is in the New Testament, but it is. You know the end of the Gospel of Matthew? This is Matthew 28. This is the Great Commission where Jesus takes his disciples up on a hill in Galilee and he gives them the Great Commission. Go therefore, make disciples of all nations. Notice he doesn't say make believers. Make disciples, right? Anyway, it says right there in verse 17. This is the climax of the whole book. About the disciples who are there and watching him give the Great Commission. In verse 17 it says, some believed, but some doubted. What? He's standing resurrected right in front of them. How could they be doubting? It's like they're standing there going, you see that guy over there? Yep. That guy over there is Jesus. Oh, no, it can't be Jesus. He was just killed not long ago. No, I'm telling you, it's him. Look, Jesus is dead. The Romans killed him. It's him. The Romans know how to kill people. They whipped him. They put nails in him. They put a spear in his side. Blood and water came out. And if they didn't kill him and he lived, the Romans would have been killed themselves. I'm telling you, Jesus is dead. It's him. It can't be. It is. How do you know? The women told me. They're not making this up. There's even potentially embarrassing details in the text about Jesus himself. Jesus is considered out of his mind by his own family who want to seize him and take him home. This is in Mark chapter 3. His own family thinks he's nuts. They may have heard the scholars say that the New Testament writers embellish Jesus to be God. Really? Then why is Mark chapter 3 in there? Which is almost universally recognized to be the earliest gospel. This is embarrassing. His brothers don't believe in him. That's embarrassing. He's called a madman. He's called a drunkard. He's called demon-possessed. Do you think they made this up? They're having the Lord. They're calling the Lord demon-possessed. They're not making that up. He has his feet wiped with the hair of a prostitute, which easily could have been seen as a sexual advance. And oh, by the way, notice there are two prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline. Who are they? Rahab and Tamar. Tamar plays the prostitute. Now, do you think when Matthew and Luke wrote the genealogies, they said, you know what, I really think we ought to spice up the Messiah's bloodline a little bit. Let's put a couple of prostitutes in there. What do you think, Rahab? No. That's embarrassing. The Messiah's bloodline. In fact, there's a lot of embarrassing people in the bloodline of the Messiah. Judah, from where we get the term Jew from, not a good guy. Jesus, from the tribe of Judah. Who was Judah? Judah's the guy that sold Joseph in the Old Testament into slavery. He's in the bloodline of Jesus. David, after a man after God's own heart, right? Yeah, but he's a liar, adulterer, and a murderer. Gee, I guess there's hope for the rest of us then, huh? Bathsheba's in there. In fact, when Matthew gets to Bathsheba in his genealogy, he doesn't mention her name. What does he say instead? What? Yes, he says Uriah's wife. He's telling the truth, right? Who was Uriah? Husband of Bathsheba, whom David murdered so he could have Bathsheba. See, Matthew's telling the truth, but he's slamming. He's telling the truth, warts and all. And then Jesus is hung on a tree. Now, if you're making a Messiah to the Jews, you don't hang him on a tree. Why not? Because according to Deuteronomy 21:23, that man is under God's curse. Well, Jesus was under God's curse. What curse? The curse of sin we put him under. But if you're making this up, you wouldn't say that. Now, think about the trees in the garden, by the way. There are two trees in the garden in Genesis. What are the two trees? Tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now go all the way to the end of the Bible now. It's very symmetrical. You find a tree in Revelation. What's the tree over here? Tree of life. Do you know there's a tree in the middle? It's the tree upon which they hung Jesus. Why? Because we sinned at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The only way we can get back to the tree of life is if Jesus takes our punishment on himself. And he does. Without that, an infinite God, an infinitely just God, can't allow the tree of life, us to access the tree of life. Only if somebody pays the price, and he does. But if you're making this up, you don't do that. The Messiah was supposed to come in and liberate them from the Romans. He came as a sacrifice, Isaiah 53. Now, there's much more about embarrassing details, embarrassing stories in the book, but we got to do one more, and that is excruciating deaths. Not only did they have embarrassing stories that they put in that obviously were true, they wouldn't have invented these, but these men died excruciating deaths when they could have saved themselves by saying it never happened. Now, it's really important to recognize that all the writers of the New Testament, with the exception of Luke, all the writers were baptized Jews who thought they were God's chosen people. They were believers in Yahweh. Luke is the only guy who wasn't a Jew. He was a Gentile. Everyone else is a Jew. And there's a couple things they didn't believe. as Jews. Number one, that someone could claim to be God. That would be blasphemy. And number two, that someone would be resurrected in the middle of time. They knew that we'd all get resurrected at the end of time, according to Daniel 12, but they didn't think there would be a resurrection in the middle of time where one guy rose from the dead. And yet, what they wind up saying, this guy claimed to be God and did rise from the dead. This was against their worldview completely. In fact, this is very important to think about this. Think about the apostles' beliefs and practices before and after the resurrection. Before the resurrection, they believed in animal sacrifice, right? They've been slaying lambs to Yahweh for hundreds of years. After, Christ's sacrifice is enough. In fact, they say we don't need to slay these lambs anymore because these lambs are just symbols of the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Here he is. Before they believed in a binding law of Moses, afterward, they said Christ's life has fulfilled the binding law of Moses. Before they believed in strict monotheism, afterwards they believed in a Trinity, 3 persons in one divine essence. Yes, you can get the Trinity from the Old Testament, but it's much clearer in the New. Before they believed in the Sabbath, in fact, they thought they could be stoned for not obeying the Sabbath. Afterwards, they're worshiping on Sunday because that's the day he rose. And Paul even says in Colossians 2, don't let anyone tell you have to obey any Sabbath or festival day. In fact, out of the 10 commandments, 9 of them are repeated in the New Testament. Which one isn't? Keep holy the Sabbath. Why? Because the Sabbath has arrived. Who's our Sabbath? Jesus is. We rest in his work. So the Sabbath isn't necessary. It's not saying you shouldn't take a day off. That's not the point. The point is that Jesus has fulfilled all this. Before, they believed in a conquering Messiah, afterwards a sacrificial Messiah. Before they believed in circumcision, afterwards they believed in baptism and communion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what would cause these men, who were pious Jews, who thought they were God's chosen people, to abandon everything on the left, they believed this for almost 2,000 years, and adopt everything on the right virtually overnight? The only thing I can think of is what psychologists call an impact event. What's an impact event? An impact event is an event that occurs in your life that is so impactful, so dramatic, that it can turn your attitude and your outlook around immediately. Some impact events are so dramatic that you'll remember them 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years if you're old enough. You might not remember what you had for breakfast this morning, but you'll remember something from 60 years ago. In fact, there's only probably a few people in this room that can answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you can remember where you were and what you were doing November 22nd, 1963, raise your hand and hold it up high. Ladies and gentlemen, you see these people with their hands up? These people are very old. Okay? November 22nd, 1963 is my earliest memory. Yes, I'm 59 years old. I know. I don't look a day over 58. Actually, I'm 60 now. I'm going to be 61 next Sunday. And my wife was very encouraging because when I turned 50, she said, honey, you're going to live to be 100. I said, how do you know? She said, because you look half dead already. All right? Anyway, November 22nd, 1963, I'm 2 years old and 2 days. I'm a toddler. I'm standing in our living room in Wanamassa, New Jersey, and my mother is sitting on an ottoman in front of a black and white TV, weeping uncontrollably. Mommy, what's the matter? They killed the president. I can still see her right now in my mind when she was 26 years old. I can see her sitting there right now. She's 84 today. But I can see her right now when she's 26. That's my earliest memory, impact event. I don't remember anything before that and very little after that. Where were you when the second plane hit the tower? You knew where you were, right, if you're old enough? I was in my home in Weddington, and I had the TV on behind me, and I was on the phone to a pastor on the north side of Charlotte, and we were talking about what topic we'd talk about when I came to speak at his church. And I said, "You got the TV on?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "I wonder if a Cessna hit the World Trade Tower." And we're talking, the TV's still behind me, and then suddenly he goes, "The second tower just got hit." I looked around, looked at the TV. The second tower's on fire. I said, "Was it a Cessna?" He goes, "No, no, no. It was a passenger plane. It looked like a United plane." I said, "You just saw that?" He goes, "It was just on live TV. It flew in there and exploded." I said, look, let me call you back." I hung up the phone. And for some reason that morning, I had CNN on, the Communist News Network. And I'm not making this up, but the commentator on CNN said this: "One has to think there's some sort of navigational error here." I said, "Navigational error? You dimwit. This is the clearest day in the history of the Big Apple. What do you think? People can't see where they're going? What do you think? Stevie Wonder's flying these planes? I mean, come on. This is terrorism." I called that pastor the next day. I said, "We're going to come to your church and talk about Islam, because that's what this is related to." Now, 9/11 was over 21 years ago. And those of you who are old enough know something about that day. But if I were to ask you, where were you 21 days ago? Most of you are going to go, "I don't know, let me look at my iPhone. What was I doing that day? I don't know." Why can you remember something from 21 years ago but not 21 days ago? No impact event 21 days ago. Impact event 21 years ago. Do you think if Jesus really rose from the dead, that would have been an impact event? Do you think they would have had any trouble remembering what he said and did after that? I mean, if he really walked out of the tomb, that's the only way really to explain how they abandoned everything on the left and adopted everything on the right. And then they could remember, and they went to their deaths saying this was true. In fact, think about it this way. What did the New Testament writers have to gain by making up a new religion? What did they get for saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? Well, first they got kicked out of the synagogue, then they got beaten, tortured, and killed. Last time I checked, that was not a list of perks. We're going to start a new religion. We are? Yeah. What's it going to get us? First get kicked out of the synagogue, then beaten, tortured, and killed. Well, sign me up. What a great idea. Why haven't we thought of this earlier? No, I don't think so. In fact, they had every motive to say the resurrection did not happen, not every motive to say it did. I get the question a lot, maybe you do. Are there any non-Christian writers that talk about Jesus and the apostles? Yes, they're all in chapter 9 of the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. They're not eyewitnesses, but they give a story congruent with the New Testament. But you know what that question normally, there's normally an illicit assumption under the question. Are there any non-Christian writers? The illicit assumption is this: you really can't trust the New Testament writers because they were the religious people, you see, and religious people tend to embellish things. They have an agenda, right? If you think about that for more than 10 seconds, you realize how stupid that is. Why? What did these people have to gain by saying it was true? They had everything to lose by saying it was true, temporally. In fact, some of you may know my friend J. Warner Wallace, who's a cold case homicide detective, who's been on Dateline more than any other homicide detective because he solves murders decades old. Jim is also a Christian who used his cold case skills to investigate the greatest homicide of all time, the homicide of Jesus. The book is called Cold Case Christianity. Great book. Anyway, here's what Jim says whenever he finds a murdered body. He knows this guy's been murdered. He says there's only 3 reasons why that guy's dead, or a combination of these 3. I don't have to track down 1,000 motivations as to why this guy was murdered. It's just one of these 3 things. In fact, one of them we mentioned this morning. There was either a sex issue, a money issue, or a power issue. Sex, money, or power. Those are the 3 things that will cause people to murder. In fact, they're the same 3 things that cause any of us to sin. Why? Because sex, money, and power are good things. The problem is they're so good, we'll often take shortcuts to get them. And so Jim will say, look, if you want to say that the New Testament writers invented all this, you got to find one or more of those 3 motivators. Because that's why someone would make this up. So let's check this out, ladies and gentlemen. Did the New Testament writers get real popular with the ladies for saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? No, didn't get sex. Did they get money? No, they weren't 21st century prosperity gospel preachers. Did they get power? No, they got the opposite. They got persecuted. Paul had power when he was Saul and was persecuting the church. As soon as he became a Christian, what happened to him? He got persecuted. No sex, no money, no power. They didn't make this up. In fact, and then why would they go die for a known lie? You say, wait a minute, Frank. If you're going to say that martyrdom somehow shows Christianity's true, don't you have to say that martyrdom shows Islam's true? No. Why? Because there's a lot of differences between the Muslim martyrs of today and the New Testament martyrs of New Testament times. But let me just give you one main difference for our purposes here. The Muslim martyrs of today haven't witnessed anything which tells them that Islam is true. They just have faith. The New Testament writers, on the other hand, witnessed Jesus rise from the dead. They saw Jesus. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had risen from the dead. Many people will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie. And the New Testament writers were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not, and they went to their deaths anyway. You can't get better evidence than that unless you were there yourself. Now, what I'm about to say, last thing I'm going to say about the New Testament here, is going to sound like heresy for some of you who believe the Bible's inerrant like I do, but it's not. Stick with me. Christianity is not true because a series of documents we put under one binding we call the Bible says it's true. In fact, Christianity would be true if the Bible never existed. You say, how can that be? Do you realize that there were thousands of Christians before a line of the New Testament was ever written? Why? Because Christianity did not originate with a book. Christianity originated with an event, the resurrection. There would be no series of books we call the New Testament written by Jews in the first century who didn't think a man could claim to be God and didn't think that there would be a resurrection in the middle of time unless a man really did claim to be God and rose from the dead. You wouldn't have these documents written by Jews in the first century unless it really happened. There's no motive to make this up. In fact, we could say it this way. The New Testament writers did not create the resurrection. The resurrection created the New Testament writers. You wouldn't have these documents written in the first century unless Jesus had risen from the dead. Now, thankfully, they chose to write it down under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and that allows us to know about it and orient our lives toward it. However, it would have been true if they'd never written it down, because it came from an event, not a book. You with me on that? So, there are other lines of evidence we didn't have time to get into, like early sources, eyewitness details, embedded confirmation, expected predictions, extra biblical writers, explosive growth of the church. Don't have time to get into it here. You can get the books, Stealing from God. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. The whole argument is this. Does truth exist? What's the answer? Somebody says there's no truth, you're going to say? Is that true? Does God exist? 3 arguments. First argument, cosmological. Second, teleological. Third, moral argument. From these 3 arguments, we get a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created and sustains all things. Are miracles possible? Greatest miracle in the Bible? Genesis 1:1. If that really occurred, is it possible that Jesus rose from the dead? Yeah, they had no motive to invent this, every motive to say it wasn't true. And they said it was true, going to their deaths when they could have said never happened. All right? Now, here's what you need to do if you want the entire presentation. Text this word evidence to 855-909-0582. 855-909-0582. You can take a picture of the screen if you want. Just text the word evidence to that phone number, and I'm going to send you the entire 362 slide PowerPoint presentation in a PDF format. And there's 4 or 5 other presentations you'll get as well. We did bring some books tonight. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. The DVD set, which is 12 lessons long in there. It's like 7 hours total. And the new book, Hollywood Heroes, How Your Favorite Movies Reveal God. Great for young people around Christmas time. Since you're watching movies at home, you can see how they all point or are stolen from the ultimate hero, Jesus of Nazareth. We have the book Stealing from God back there as well. All right, so for more, if you want to go further, make sure you text the word evidence to that phone number. Also, the books and the DVDs are back there. We're now teaching online courses. Go to crossexamine.org. I teach a bunch of them. We have other instructors that teach them. So you can take classes right from the comfort of your own home. Also, we're on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. In fact, we've actually combined these three into one social media platform. We call it UTwitface. Okay? It's kind of a Jersey thing. Have you signed up for UTwitface yet? Okay. We're also on Instagram and TikTok, and there's almost 2,000 videos on our YouTube channel. Many of them are from the college campus for Q&A. Don't forget about our podcast. I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist is the podcast. Once, sometimes twice a week. And we're on TV, as I mentioned this morning, Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Look for NRB TV on Roku. Most of you have Roku, or you can go to our website and see it. And if you don't do anything else, download the free Cross-Examined app. 2 words in the App Store, Cross-Examined. It's got the podcast on it. It's got the TV show streaming. It even has a quick answer section. What's a quick answer section? Well, common objections you get to Christianity. So you might be having lunch with somebody and they say something that's an objection and you don't know how to answer it. All you need to do is take out your phone and go, hey, hang on, I'm getting a text. Hey, what about this? All right, you got an answer right there. All right? Now, last thing. It's true. So what? So what if Christianity's true? So what? What does it mean? Well, the greatest news of all is that somebody actually did die for you. Jesus of Nazareth. Now, when I was in the Navy many years ago, I was in naval aviation, so we had to earn golden wings, which were fairly hard to earn. But there's nothing more difficult in any military, especially the Navy, than to earn a golden trident. That's what the SEALs earn. Very few people that start SEAL training get through it. 5, maybe 10%. Those that do wear that golden trident with pride, it is their identity. When Michael Monsoor was buried in Rosecrans Cemetery in San Diego, California, after sacrificing himself for his buddies in Iraq, just about every Navy SEAL on the West Coast showed up for his funeral. And when they passed his casket, they took off their tridents and they pressed them into his casket. They took their identity and put their identity in the one that sacrificed for them. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to get our identity from the one who sacrificed himself for us. Of course, our culture says, oh, no, put your identity in your ethnic group or your race or your political party or your sexual orientation or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your vocation or your bank account. Do you realize, ladies and gentlemen, none of those things are ultimate? If you put your identity in your job, what happens when you lose your job or you retire? You no longer have an identity? You put your identity in another person. What happens, God forbid, when that person dies or leaves you? You no longer have an identity? You put your identity in your sexual orientation. What happens when you can't sexually perform anymore? You no longer have an identity? You know, you can lose everything in this world. You can lose your vocation. You can lose your money. You can lose your health. You can lose your spouse. You can lose your kids. You can lose respect. You can ultimately will lose your life. The only thing you can't lose is Jesus. That's your identity. It's eternal. And John, who was an eyewitness and traveled with Jesus, wrote a biography we call the Gospel of John. And in the very first chapter, he says, he has given you the right to become a child of God. And when you're a child, what do you get? You get the inheritance. You get an identity and an eternity. What could be better than that? You get the keys to the kingdom. And here we are fiddling around with all temporary stuff. That's all going to go away anyway. Jesus not only sacrificed himself for us, he also rose again to show that we're all going to rise again too. The only question is, where are you going to rise to? Are you going to rise to be with God? Or are you going to rise to be separated from God? That's the only question. and to ensure that you're going to rise with God and be with him is you simply accept the free gift he's offered you. If you don't want that, he's not going to force you into heaven against your will. You'll be separated from him, and that won't be fun. All right. So what we're going to do now is go to questions, and we'd like people to ask questions by coming up to the microphone, if that's all right. And since no one likes to ask the first question, we're going to move right on to the second question. Okay? So, second question. Once the first person starts, then we'll be moving. So, questions, anyone? Could be anything we've covered or anything we haven't covered. Yes, sir. What's your name? Lloyd?
Yes.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
What's going
Question,
on? Yes.
Do you not use the inspiration of the Holy Spirit when it comes to memory for impactful events? I've heard you say before a couple of times how they say the things they say, they remember the things they say
Yes.
because of impactful events. But at the same time, the Bible talks about, in 2 Timothy 3:16, and in 2 Peter talks about the Holy Spirit moving holy men of God. And
No, I
also, but I don't hear it. I've heard you a couple times, but I haven't heard you use that part. It's been more, and I wonder if it's from the perspective of who you're speaking to, because they're atheists, and if you're talking about the Holy Spirit, it would make
Well, I actually think it's both. I think an impact event is going to help you remember what happened, and the Holy Spirit is going to bring to their remembrance everything Jesus said, everything I said to you. There's that passage in John where he says, I'll bring to your remembrance everything I said to you. The problem is sometimes Christians take that out of context and think that that's about them or us, that God's going to bring to our remembrance everything he told. Well, he didn't tell us anything. He told them to write it down, okay? Right. So I think it's both. I think the impact event and the inspiration of the Holy Spirit is going to allow them to remember what happened and what he said. And the reason I say the impact event is because there's a skeptic out there by the name of Bart Ehrman. You've probably heard him, who teaches at UNC Chapel Hill. And he'll say stuff like this. Can you remember the 2005 State of the Union speech by George W. Bush? And everyone's going to go, oh, no, I don't remember what he said. Right? Why? It wasn't an impact event. Right. But I'll tell you what I do remember George Bush doing 10 days after 9/11, going before the whole Congress and holding up that badge. Do you remember when he did that? I remember that because it's an impact event. I also remember the first game at Yankee Stadium after 9/11. He was going to throw out the first pitch, and nobody knew. Are we going to get hit again? Are there snipers in Yankee Stadium? And he went out there with a bulletproof vest under his Yankee jacket. And before the game, he went to Derek Jeter and he said, I got to warm up. So they have this bullpen underneath the dugout there. So Jeter took him back there and he said, don't bounce it, they'll boo you. Right? Don't bounce the first pitch, right? The ceremonial pitch. So Bush went out there, walked out onto the field, went to the mound, and threw a strike. And the whole place just erupted. And even Rosie O'Donnell, you remember her? She was tearing up going, that's my president. Remember he had like an 80% approval rating after that or higher? Impact event. Do I remember the ceremonial first pitch at any? No, I don't. I remember that one. And if Jesus walked out of the tomb, that would have been an impact event. Okay. Remember, they're scared, scattered, skeptical. They're hiding, and then they see him resurrected. That's going to change them, right?
I only asked because it was over, the information was over a course of 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so to remember everything like that without being inspired or,
Well, they were following him, but think about this too. This is what people, I think, miss. Do you think that Jesus just gave the Sermon on the Mount once? He may have given that several times over the course of his 3 years going to different locales. I mean, he may have, just like a politician goes around and says this thing, like I've done this presentation before, right? I'm going to different churches. So suppose you traveled with me. In fact, some people do, like the guy who does the video for me, Clint Boland, great guy, does the video for when we stream it from a college campus. He could do this presentation. He doesn't need me. If I go down sick, he can stand up and do it. He knows exactly every line. He knows exactly what changes are on the PowerPoint because he's heard it enough, right? And so these guys who've been traveling with Jesus for 3 years, they could remember basically what he said.
I'll follow you. I was at Ohio State also.
Oh, all right, there you go. Yeah, you probably could do it too, Lloyd. In fact, I'm not feeling so well. You come on up, man. It's just all right, who else? Anyone else? Dun, 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 dun. You don't have to wait for the person to sit down, by the way. Stand by. Hang on one sec.
Sure.
Just trying to give us another. Here's that. There's evidence to that phone number. If you want to give us a survey, text the word event to that number so you can tell us how to improve this presentation. That'd be good. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
My name's Angie.
Angie. Go ahead,
And
Angie.
I've noticed it's some of the younger generation, I'm talking of my son's generation, they'll say, oh, well, I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic. What is the difference between those two?
Okay, good question. An atheist is someone who says, I don't think God exists. An agnostic is someone who says, I don't know. Okay? So I don't know whether God exists or not. A lot of times, agnostics are really apatheists. What does that mean? Well, they don't care whether God exists or not. They're not even looking into it, right?
Okay.
So
we could use the same tools then for the agnostic or the
apatheist, someone
Yes.
who's, not interested at all. Normally, the atheists that I talk to are interested in this stuff. In fact, they're so interested in it, they spend a lot of time online trying to rebuke Christians. And you're going, why would you care if someone's a Christian, right?
Right.
Why are you trying to give the so-called good news of atheism to everybody? Okay? I think I know why generally is, well, there could be a couple of psychological reasons, but one of the reasons is they think Christians are going to somehow get political power and impose their will on other people, so we got to talk you out of being a Christian, right? But some of them, I think, protest too much, right? You go, there's more to this than just a rational investigation as to what's true. So you've got atheists who say there's no God, agnostics who we don't know, or an apatheist, I don't care, and then theists who say I think God does exist. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yes, Moriah, is that right? Moira. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question. I have a daughter that's graduating this year in high school, and I heard you say that you go to high school.
Yeah, get a little closer to the mic
Okay,
if you
I hear
would.
that you say you go to high school.
Yes.
So my question is, because some of this might be above, and because religion isn't taught in school, what presentation would you bring if I could get you to come to our school?
Well, is it a public school?
It is.
Well,
Is that not allowed?
it's what?
Is that not allowed?
Well, I mean, I could speak at a public school. I couldn't do a lot of this, but
Right, that's what I'm saying.
typically what we do at a public school, if we go, we usually go after hours for kids that want to come after hours or before hours or that kind of thing.
Because the reason why I was saying that, they're going to be the young adults out, in the world.
Yeah.
And for graduating seniors who are going to need their faith to lean upon, and I know that's our job as a parent, but you would be a good tool.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to say, how could I get that into the school? Like, how could I get you into the school, into the actual school?
Well, actually, there's nothing unconstitutional about that.
No, I know that. I
There
do know
would
that.
probably just be blowback from some people saying, well, why don't you have the Muslim in there? Why don't you have the New Ager in there? Well, actually, they could do that,
We
right?
actually have a very, very small school, and it's Parkwood.
Oh.
So Parkwood would probably allow that. Wouldn't be a lot of this.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of those parents. So how would I get...
Well, what you can do is, what you can say is, you can go to our YouTube channel, Cross-Examined YouTube channel, and if you know somebody there and say, they could just pick any of the ones we've done at a college. They're all up there. Like the last one we did was Rutgers, just like 2 weeks ago, okay? They could just go watch the thing at Rutgers and say, could we Would the kids be interested in this?
Because I'm thinking a question and answer thing with you, if there was a smaller, shorter presentation.
Sure, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I really do think that you would open their heart. The Holy Spirit, was lowering that over me
Okay.
to ask you.
Okay, well,
I don't
we could
know.
try it.
I feel like I got to make that
Look, the
happen
worst
somehow.
they can say is no.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right. Anyone else? Anyone have any good jokes, perhaps? So one atom said to another atom, I just lost an electron. And the second said to the first, are you sure? And the first said, I'm positive. That's my science joke. Yes, sir. Go ahead. What's your name?
My name's Jacob. Nice to meet you.
Jacob, go ahead,
Thank you
sir.
very
Yeah.
much for coming here.
Oh,
I
my
really
pleasure.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Dr.
Get a little
Turek.
closer if you would. It might.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I don't know if this is a little too off topic, but
No, it's okay.
I really appreciate the life of Dr. Geisler and was wondering if you had any stories from, I believe you studied under him, correct?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
If you could share any stories of studying under or co-writing your book with him.
Sure. Well, so did your pastor, Pastor Chris, studied under Dr. Geisler too. He was he died about 3.5 years ago at 87. When he died, they figured out how many books he had written, or co-written, or updated, and it was 129. So he's written more books than most people have read. Certainly, probably he's written more books than most people have seen, because nobody goes to the library anymore, right? 129 books, okay? And most of them, of course, had to do with Christian apologetics and evidence. And he was brilliant. He's forgotten more than I'll ever know. He's written an encyclopedia of apologetics. It's this thick, right? The Encyclopedia of Apologetics. And he was really good at philosophy, which is important because philosophy is right thinking about reality. How can you think through things? And he was really, really good at that and had a great memory. Probably so many memories, but one of the ones, this goes way back to 1998. He and I were at McLean Bible Church, and at that time it was the Clinton, Monica Lewinsky thing. Those of you who are old enough can remember this. And Ken Starr, who was the independent counsel, was the prosecutor of that, and it was his church that we were at. And so there were armed marshals around and everything was just a little bit tense. And we got a question from the audience, and it was about Hank Hanegraaff, who's the Bible Answer Man who lives here in Charlotte. And Hank was a controversial figure at the time because he came out against some of the prosperity gospel teachers with a book called Christianity in Crisis. But Hank and Norm were friends, and so the question from the back of the room was like, what do you think of Hank Hanegraaff? I'm like, I'm glad he's here. What am I going to say, right? So he said, well, I'll tell you, if Hank's a friend of mine, I think he does a lot of good work. In fact, I agree with 90% of what he's doing. I don't even agree with 90% of what I'm doing, right? And that was it, right? Because you're thinking, what's the 10% he doesn't agree with, right? So he was really good at short answers, powerful answers, and I learned so much from him, and I know Pastor Chris has too. And he lives on through his books, quite obviously. All right?
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
All right.
Dr. Geisler's responses have, specifically his philosophical responses, have really brought me in my faith when I was in my crisis of faith.
Oh, yeah, good.
I really appreciate you.
Good. God bless. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Hey, Frank. Good
Yeah.
evening. My name is Randy.
Hey, Randy.
As we know, the first century church started with much persecution. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to a lot of those who have end-time belief is pre-trib, in which the church won't suffer persecution as much. Seems we want to comfort them. But do you believe, what's your personal belief of the end times before Christ returns, of how much persecution the church believers will actually have to go through before Christ returns?
Yeah, that's a great question, but I am not on the planning committee. I'm on the welcoming committee. So I have friends who study this a lot more than I do, and they're Bible-believing conservative scholars, and they come to opposite conclusions as to the end times. We all know we win in the end, but actually how that plays out is a question that is debatable among Christians, so I don't take a hard position on it. because, as I say, people much smarter than me have come to opposite conclusions on it. So I don't really take a position. It's not a fundamental of the faith. It is a fundamental of faith that Christ is going to come back, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's not a fundamental of faith about when or how or any of these things. So I don't take a hard position on it. There are books you can get on it that, you know, in fact, if you're interested in Revelation, there's a book called Revelation 4 Views. It's like one book, and it goes through Revelation and gives the 4 different ways to interpret Revelation that scholars have taken, and you can kind of see how, you know, the futurist view is, the historical view, the allegorical view. It's all right in there, so that might be a book to get.
I thank you, and just for the record, my end-time theology can be summed up this way. When we hear the toot, we scoot.
That's very good. That's very good. Yes, sir. What's your name?
I'm Jack, sir.
Yeah,
So-
Jack, you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Get a little
So-
closer if you would, Jack.
I can
go
do
ahead.
that.
Yeah.
So my question was, you said that there were, talking about homicides, there were 3 main motivators. It was sex, money, and power.
Yeah.
So when they killed Jesus, would there not have been the motivation to preserve the pre-established power of the Jewish
Yes.
system?
Exactly. That's why Caiaphas, I think, had Jesus killed. He says in John 12, of course, Lazarus is resurrected as recorded in John 11, and Caiaphas says, the high priest, he says, it's better that one innocent man die than the whole nation perish. I think Caiaphas knew, at least he had evidence that Jesus was the Messiah, but he wanted to maintain his position of power. If Jesus succeeds and he's really the Messiah, he's out of a job. You don't need a temple anymore when God comes back to earth. In fact, now we are the temple, right? We're all temples. So he was out of a job, so he wanted to maintain his power. And of course, one of the most dangerous things in Rome would be to claim you're a king. Because what are the Romans going to say? Oh, no, there's no king but Caesar. So Jesus kind of had a double whammy by saying he was God, or by claiming he was the king of the Jews. The Romans didn't want him to succeed, and neither did the Jews. It was sedition to the Romans to say that you were a king of the Jews, and of course it was blasphemy for Jesus to say he was God, and the temple authorities didn't like that, so that's one of the reasons they had him killed.
Right.
All right?
Pretty easy question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
all right.
Appreciate it.
All right, thanks so much. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Cindy.
Hey, Cindy.
Can you touch a little bit on the inerrancy of the scriptures?
Yes. Like, in what sense?
Okay, there are so many translations.
Okay.
And there are some groups that say King James, the original King James.
Okay.
And that's it. And then with Jairus being here, there's scriptures there. And people, you know, I have understood that you're working under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And I'm not taking away from that, but it's a very difficult situation. A task to do the translation.
Yes. Well, typically when scholars talk about inerrancy, they're talking about what we call the autographs, not the translations of the text, but the original documents upon which, say, Paul wrote the book of Romans or John wrote the Gospel of John. They're talking about those documents being inerrant. And the question is, how do you get back to those documents? Because we don't have those original documents anymore. We only have copies of them. So what scholars do is they compare the copies, and by comparing the copies, they can recreate the original. Even if there are errors in the copies, they can recreate the original. Because if there's an error in one place in one manuscript, well, 5 other manuscripts have the right reading, and that one doesn't have the right reading. So if the 5 say this is the right reading, well, we know that's an error, the one that doesn't. And they compare them all and can reconstruct the original anywhere between 97 and 99.5% accuracy, but depend on who you read. Now, the little bit we don't know about doesn't affect any theological issue. These are minor variants in the text, okay? So it's not translations, whether you're reading the King James or the NIV or the ESV. Those are all just ways of translating from the original Greek into English. And all of them have their strengths and all of them have their weaknesses. Now, the reason some people were married to the King James, first of all, it's a beautiful language, right, in 1611. And it was the English kind of standard translation for a long time. But since 1611, when King James put that translation together, we've discovered far more manuscripts than we had in 1611. So we've been able to clear up some ambiguities in some areas and fix those for later translations. And now you have the New King James, right, which takes some of the archaic English words that we no longer use out of the text so we can understand it in modern English. Right. And most translations are good. Most versions are good. There's just one version called the Perversion, the New World Translation that the Jehovah's Witnesses put out that you should not read because they've actually added or taken away words from the original in order to somehow get their theology to work from the Bible. Okay? So when we teach, we have a course called How to Interpret Your Bible. We say, read a number of translations if you're trying to study, because there are different ways of translating the same words or the same thoughts, and it depends on what you're looking for. In fact, it's not always best to have a literal translation. Why? Let me give you an example of this. There's a passage in 1st or 2nd Samuel, I can't remember which, it may be 1st Samuel, where Saul is trying to track down David in the hills of En-Gedi. You remember this? And David is hiding with his men in a cave. And Saul goes into the cave, and it says, the literal translation says, Saul went into the cave to cover his feet. You go, what the heck does that mean?
He was using the potty.
Yeah, exactly. The literal translation was a euphemism, say, cover your feet. Like the NIV translated, he went in to relieve himself, or he went in to urinate, okay? In other words, if you got the literal translation, you don't recognize that ancient way of saying go into the bathroom, right? Cover your feet. Cover your feet. When I go, I want to make sure I clear my feet, okay? But don't you? I mean, right? So the literal translation doesn't always work. Sometimes you need a translator to come in and say, here's what it really means. Right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hello, my name is Jason.
Jason.
How do you present apologetics as a logical argument to a generation? Seems like now people are willing to accept contradicting claims, like men can get pregnant or stuff like that. Like you can't even talk about truth if people are willing to accept things that don't even make logical sense.
Yeah, well, there's some people you're never going to get to, right? But look, if somebody doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman, then I can't help them to believe in an invisible being that you can't see, God, right? If you can't recognize what's clearly in front of you, if you can't look in the mirror and know what you are, then how am I going to convince somebody that God exists? So there are some people that have suppressed the truth so long that now they've been given over to futile thinking. And Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 1. If you suppress the truth long enough, particularly in the area of sexuality, God's going to give you up to your own desires. You're not even going to be thinking in a futile way. You're then going to be cheering on people who do evil. This is the end of Romans chapter 1. And that chapter 1, verses 18 to 32, is the best, most accurate description of our culture right now, and it was written 2,000 years ago. Just read Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 32. And here, we're seeing it. We're seeing people cheering evil on. We're seeing people that don't know the difference between a man and a woman. Now think about this, though. Transgenderism presupposes fixed genders. Why? Because if I'm a man, but I think I'm a woman, I have to have some idea what a man is and some idea what a woman is to know the difference. I also have some idea what a man is and some idea what a woman is to make the so-called transition. Otherwise, transgenderism wouldn't exist. So on one hand, they want to say that the genders are fluid. On the other hand, if they're fluid, there's no way you could be a transgender, because there'd be no way to know you were in the wrong body, so to speak. Okay, so it's fraught with contradiction, unfortunately. And most of the people that are dealing with this now, I think, are not people that have true gender dysphoria. 10 years ago, gender dysphoria affected about mostly 1 in 10,000 men. Now it's affecting mostly teenage girls. In fact, Abigail Shrier, who wrote the book called, what's the book Abigail wrote now? It's about the transgender craze. Irreversible Damage. She's not a Christian, Jewish lady, but wrote a book about what's going on. She said in some schools she's visited, 30% of the girls are claiming to be trans. Now, how does this happen? How do you go from 1 in 10,000 men to now 3,000 in 10,000 girls in some places? Where does this happen? It happens via social media. It's a social contagion. There's no faster way for you to get approved of in our society than to come out and claim you're trans. Everyone's going to applaud you, and anybody that says, don't do this, you're going to hurt yourself, is going to be shouted down and canceled. And what do you want when you're a young person? You just want to fit in. And so the fastest way to fit in is to claim you're trans. Here's the problem. Those people that do try and get the so-called surgery, if they have true gender dysphoria, there's a honeymoon period for 5 to 10 years where they feel better. About the 10-year mark, they have a suicide rate 19 times higher than the general public. It does not help. And I don't know if you've heard this, ladies and gentlemen. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you that in March 31st of this year, President Biden came out on Trans Visibility Day and basically said, through his Health and Human Services Department, that if you don't affirm your child through what is called gender-affirming care, then it's possible the government's going to come take that child away from you. In other words, and the memo says, as young as 2 or 3 years old, if your 2-year-old boy says he's a girl and you don't affirm that, the government is saying we may come take that child from you. Do you guys know about this? Now, that is madness. And if you don't think we have to be involved politically, you haven't been paying attention. Because if you're not going to stand up to a government that wants to come take your children away from you, when are you going to stand up? So, we've got to be engaged. All right? Thanks, Jason. Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm John.
Hey, John, go ahead.
What are your thoughts on Christians adopting yoga as a form of worshiping Jesus?
A form of worshiping Jesus. My question would be, what do you mean by yoga?
I know a lot of other religious organizations use yoga to connect to other, I guess, spirits. Or
I don't know how this is done in yoga. That's the problem. I know years ago it was connected with the New Age. And if it's the same thing, where you're trying to empty your mind, then that's not the Christian way.
it's like chakras of your body, and I don't know. I've seen lots of churches adopting, like, they'll call it holy yoga. And I'm like, well...
If it's like the traditional yoga where you're emptying your mind and you're open to anything that comes in your mind, that's not Christian. You're dealing with the occult then. But if there's a new kind and they're just calling it yoga and you're meditating on the scriptures, okay.
Okay.
All right.
I was curious.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Love the shirt, man. Where'd you get the shirt?
My wife made it.
Oh, beautiful. Look at that. Look at the shirt. You can pick up your check after the seminar.
It actually worked. We just went to Olive Garden, and our waitress asked me about it. She was agnostic, and was able to actually turn her to look at finding some answers in you and in J. Warren Wallace.
Oh, excellent. Good. What's your name?
My name's Michael.
Hey, Michael. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, I heard back in the day, the Pharisees were actually extremely depressed. They're very Sadducee.
That's pretty good right there.
My wife asked me a question, and I try not to dive too much into this, but she asked me if I thought that Solomon was saved because he was so loved by God, but then at the end of his life he started worshiping other gods. I said, look, I know I'm going to heaven. I know the thief on the cross went to heaven. Other than that, I don't dive into who's saved, who isn't saved, because I don't know what the personal relationship is with God, but I felt like that's a cop-out.
It is kind of an unanswerable question. Was Solomon saved? What do you think, Pastor Chris?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea? Huh? I thought so. You think he was? Yes, sir. Okay. Maybe he was. Yeah. Okay. Remember, he had half a heart. David had a whole heart. Even though David was a sinner too, right? But I always said that, David's had a whole heart toward God, and Solomon only had half a heart toward God. Solomon is a good example. Solomon's like a perfect example for today. Solomon had everything. He had the big three. He had sex, money, and power, and he was still miserable. Right? Yeah. Kind of like Tony Stark in Iron Man. Right? That's what we have in Hollywood heroes. Tony Stark had everything. You thought you need to be happy, sex, money, and power, and he's still miserable. He had no purpose. Right?
One more question.
Sure, go ahead.
Would you be able to sign my shirt?
Sign your shirt? Yeah, you got a white pen?
I've got a white shirt.
Oh, look at that. All right, beautiful. Yeah, see me after. Absolutely. All right. Yes, go ahead, Lloyd. Now, why were you at Ohio State?
I'm from Ohio.
What do you
just saw you when I was down there. We moved down here a couple years
ago. Oh, you
ago.
moved down here. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
I'll follow you.
All right, good.
This has to do with the debate you had with Christopher Hitchens. I don't know if you remember, but you were speaking on how, as far as miracles concerned, the rarity of them, which is kind of makes them miracles.
Yeah.
And the resurrection being that miracle, and he challenged you as far as and I didn't get to see all of it. That's why I'm asking. When Lazarus was resurrected, and then when the tombs were open, when Jesus died, how did you rectify that?
Well, Lazarus was resurrected, really more resuscitated. The same body that went into the tomb did come out, but it died again.
Okay.
And the only thing we have on the saints coming out of the tombs is in Matthew 27. It doesn't say what ultimately happened to them, but I would assume the same thing that happened to Lazarus. Lazarus then died again. Jesus is the first fruits of the ultimate resurrection. His body is risen in a glorified state. He wouldn't die again. And that's the body we're ultimately going to get, an indestructible body. So Lazarus, the other people resurrected in the scriptures, Jairus' daughter, there's a few others you could look at. They then died again. Jesus didn't die again. He had the ultimate resurrection, glorified body.
So the miracle was in not maybe so much as him rising, but as in what he became, that he didn't die again.
Well, it was both, obviously. I mean, it's still a miracle to bring Lazarus back, right? But he didn't have the ultimate resurrection body. Jesus is the first fruits of that resurrection.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Lloyd. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Hey, Stephanie.
I'm asking a question that my son asked me the other day, and it's been haunting me ever since.
All right.
The question is, as believers who want to grow in our faith, we're sincerely seeking the Lord. Sometimes you're at church, you're really touched by the message, you're sincerely wanting it to transform your life. Why is it so quick that we get distracted by the world, and sometimes on the way home from church we're already thinking about other things, we're having an argument, we're being selfish, when the transformation that you also see in the New Testament, the disciples so radically changed, so transformed. How can we see that in our own lives, and why is it so quick that we leak that filling of the Holy Spirit, that transformation that he brings in?
Well, that's never happened to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Must just be you, Stephanie. I don't. No, we're fallen creatures. And look, even Peter, right? Peter, after he sees Jesus resurrected from the dead, not long after that, he actually has to be dope slapped by Paul, because he decides that he's not going to mix it up with the Gentiles anymore. He's just going to eat with the Jews, and he's going back to circumcision and all this. Did he just forget He had a vision. Jesus told him, eat anything. And now he's trying to go back on that? I mean, he's fickle too. We're all fickle. We're all fallen. So I think we should be making progress to become more and more like Christ. But it's an up and down thing, sanctification is. It doesn't happen and now suddenly you're a saint. It's a long-term process. And so we should expect we're going to have ups and downs. None of us are going to be perfect. Only Jesus was. And even the disciples, they had issues too. And they had better evidence than we have, right? I mean, Peter witnessed, right? He witnessed Jesus resurrected from the dead. And still, he got fickle. He didn't follow Jesus' commands either sometimes. So I think it's just a human condition. But thankfully, Jesus is perfect, and his sacrifice overcomes our wicked and fickle ways because we just trust in him, and that takes care of our sin. All right? All right, thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, that's one of the hardest questions is why do Christians sin? We're still fallen. There's still the old nature, right? Yes?
So I have another question about, I'm not sure how much maybe you've heard this. Just see me out on this. Have you heard that there have been scriptures that have been kept from us? Have you heard that?
Like
anyway?
what? What do you mean?
Some things I've been seeing, doing some deep dives and research in what the government's withheld and et cetera, et cetera. So this is probably going to sound crazy, but they said that there's a total of 777 books of the Bible initially.
Who said this?
It's just something I've read. I'm just going off of something.
Was it on the internet?
Well, how else am I going to research?
Because if so, it's got to be true, right?
No, I didn't say it was true.
Oh, okay,
I was
all right.
asking if you'd heard it. The thing I was going to say about this, it kind of goes with what the question I asked you. So this summer, I went home to Colorado and I visited family, and I have two brothers that are priests and have been priests for years, and they know 11 languages.
Catholic priests.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I don't claim to know a lot about the Bible. I am a new study of that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things they said just this past, so it wasn't this summer, but it was just the season before, let's just say, because I'm not sure of the timing of it, but they released, and I'm saying who's they, and when I got from them, it was the Pope canonized Christ's life, and that will be now added to the Bibles. Well, I'm like, what authority does the Pope have in even Christianity? That's a valid question, is it not?
Sure, yeah. As a Protestant, I don't think the Pope's proclamations are necessarily true. I mean, they might be.
Well, I don't even think he
Yeah.
is not a good
Not this
not
Pope,
a good
certainly.
leader, no,
Yeah.
correct.
And what Protestants often forget, most of the time when the Pope is speaking, he's not speaking infallibly.
Right.
It's only when he speaks infallibly, which is very rare.
Right.
But no, I haven't heard the 777 books, and that's a relief, because if there were 777 books, I can't even keep up with the 66 that we have.
Exactly.
So you imagine if you had to add that,
Well, that's why I'm saying, where did this come out of?
Oh, who knows? I
Okay.
mean, there's...
But it's going to be added to our Bibles, and
No.
it's already added to some. I'm not kidding. I'm not making that
Well,
up.
there are added books in the Old Testament to the Catholic Bible, but that's a whole other story.
It is.
Okay.
Which they don't teach, by the way. When I was growing up, we never pulled out a Bible. We had epistles.
Right.
Right? So not even the same, not even close.
Yeah, no, look, the Catholic Church had no power over selecting what should be in the Bible
So who did?
early on.
Who did? Who
Well,
made this the word? Why do we follow that? As a newer Christian asking.
Well, the reason we follow the books that we
Word.
have in the New Testament are because they were written by eyewitnesses or people that knew eyewitnesses like Luke. Okay. And the early church fathers, these are people that lived in like 100 AD. The people, 25 of the 27 books were quoted as authoritative by like 108 AD. People like Ignatius and others, and this is all in the book, that book right there. I don't have enough faith to be an
bought that
atheist.
one, so that's
okay.
good.
Well, you have to read it to be saved. I don't know if you know that. Hey, look, I don't make the rules, okay? I don't make the rules. So, we know what there was some dispute over some books early on, like James, should that be in there, and Revelation.
And why did they have the four Gospels that are very much the same?
Well, no, they're not. I
mean, some of them tell me that. Some people
the
have said
first
that to me.
three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are synoptic. They have a lot of common material, but there's also a lot of material in there that isn't common.
Right.
Like there's several chapters in Luke that are unique to him,
Right.
including the prodigal son passage and several others. John is a different gospel that has more private conversations that Jesus had, whereas Matthew, Mark, and Luke are dealing more with his public ministry. John is more of a private ministry going on. So the books of the Bible were known very early on in Christianity. Okay, there was some dispute early on, but as I say, by the second century, early second century, most agreed what was in the text. And it wasn't until, of course, you get to the later councils after Christianity had been deemed tolerable. Remember, prior to about 311, Christianity was basically outlawed in the Roman Empire. It wasn't until Constantine made it tolerable, and then 70 or so years later, it was made the official religion of the Roman Empire. But up to that point, you couldn't get together at the local Hilton and have your Bible conference, right? You might get into trouble for doing that. So the church councils came together after that and formalized what had already been known.
So do you think the Holy Spirit, when Christ was risen, and the time when the apostles saw him and met with him, and even in disbelief and then belief, right? Do you think the Holy Spirit at that moment that came over them, the helper, is what gave them to help do the writings?
Yeah, and there's different theories of inspiration, but yes, the Holy Spirit helped them remember everything they said and guided them into all truth so they could write it down. Now, this happened relatively quickly in the big scale of things because these men were going to die relatively soon. So some say John is written late, like in the 90s AD. I think it was written prior to 70 AD. So I think all of the New Testament writings, maybe with the exception of Revelation, they're all written prior to 70 AD, and we talk about it in that book.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, young man.
My name is Ruben, and I was thinking, is like fighting bad because you can fight for good, but then you could like just fight for power?
Yep.
And overall, is it good or bad?
It depends. It depends on what you're fighting over. Like, for example, years ago, I don't know if we teach this in school anymore. You've heard of World War II, right?
Yeah.
When Adolf Hitler decided he was going to invade Europe and try and turn everyone into a Nazi, which means he wanted to kill Jews and other people, was it a good thing that we fought against him?
Yes.
Yes, right? We have the right to defend ourselves, and we have an obligation if we're with an ally and we have a treaty with that other country. And if we have had this treaty that says if you get attacked, we're going to come to your aid, and they did get attacked, then we came to their aid. Now, this didn't really apply much in World War II. What got us into World War II was when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Then we were attacked. And so we declared war on Japan, and then Hitler declared war on us, which was a big mistake for him. So, yes, there are times when fighting is necessary. In a fallen world, force is sometimes going to be necessary. Now, think about this. That's with a legitimate government, right? You do personally have the right to defend yourself if someone's trying to hurt you, but you shouldn't go around picking fights, obviously, right? So, in a government, God has set up government, and the government is supposed to protect innocent people from evil. And Paul says in Romans 13 that the ruler doesn't bear the sword for nothing, meaning he has the capacity to use the sword, even capital punishment, to kill criminals who are hurting other people. Okay? So the government's there to protect innocent people from evil. That's the number one role of government. And they do that inside the country, normally by police, and outside the country, normally by the military. And so if you're part of one of those two organizations and we declare war, or there's something that happens, say, in a community, you have the right to engage in conflict for the right reason. We could get into all sorts of things called just war theory and all that, but yes, under the right circumstances, fighting is not only good, it would be a dereliction of duty to not. Okay, good question. Thank you, Ruben. You know, the kids always have the best questions. They ask questions nobody wants to ask, right? So, all righty. Maybe we'll just take one or two more. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Meg.
Hey, May.
How would you engage with someone who says that God is female?
Okay, when somebody says something, it's not your job to refute what they say. It's their job to support what they say. So I would ask, first of all, what do you mean by female?
Well,
Right.
saying God is she, God our mother.
Okay.
This was a pastor in one of our former churches who...
Okay. I would ask, what evidence do you have that God is a she? Okay. Now, technically, the true God doesn't have genitalia, right?
Right.
So when we say, when he calls himself a father, he has fatherly qualities, right? He's strong, he cares. That's what a father does. He provides, okay? But technically, God is not a he, like we think of a he, because he doesn't have gender like we have gender, okay? But I always ask people that say things like that, probably the person you're talking of would appear to be far left in her probably theological and political views.
Probably. It was actually a man. but
Okay,
yes.
or okay, him. So if you were to ask him, if you were to come to him and say, May, my pronouns are he and him. If you were to say that to him, do you think he'd respect that?
Probably.
He'd probably say yes. Okay, so if God's pronouns are he and him, are you going to respect those? Why are you going to respect my pronouns even though I'm not a he or him? But you're not going to respect God, who in his revelation says he is a he or him.
That
See?
is good. Yeah.
So here's one of the problems I think we find is that people are making God in their own image rather than we're saying we're made in God's image. We want to make up our own God and then view this God as someone who approves of everything we do. You know, Tim Keller, the pastor from New York, says, if God agrees with you on everything, you probably have the wrong God. Right? If he doesn't challenge you somewhere, and he challenges everyone, right? There are things I wish that weren't in the Bible, right? You? Right? Okay? And there are other people that wish other things weren't in the Bible, but they're there. And if the Bible's true, oh well, I'm not God, he is. I submit to him. All right?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, May. All right. Pastor Chris, you want to close us out? All right.
Let's give a hand to Frank. I sit there and I just say, wow, you know. I had the privilege of sitting under Dr. Geisler myself, and I would just sit there with my mouth open a lot of times, just thinking, well, that's pretty easy, really. The responses to some of the questions, they're really pretty easy. And that's why, you know, I try to teach our youth here at the church is that let the other person prove their case to you. Just keep asking them questions. And that's why we even learned tonight, you know what? Let's ask them questions. Tell them or ask them what they believe and why they believe it. And then as they do that, then start putting in the knowledge that we have, that we've learned, especially on a lot of this tonight. So let me thank you for being here. Frank is going to be down at the fellowship hall. If you go out the doors, you take a left, you'll see a real long building down there. He's got all of his books down there. He's got, do you have legislating morality?
No, I couldn't bring that. Okay. I got 3 of the 5. Okay, he's got 3 of the 5. Answers a lot of the questions, once again, that we went over tonight, or maybe even some questions that you have that you didn't ask tonight. I would encourage you to get those books. He will be down there, and you can talk to him a little bit more down there.
but be sure you stop by and get you a book. You asked the question about something that Dr. Geisler would have said that Frank remembered. He told you, here's something that he told me. When I was first starting to go to the seminary, I asked him this question: why should I come to Southern Evangelical Seminary? He said this answer. He said, Chris, he said, when I was growing up, he said, I was flunking out of school. He said, I wasn't smart at all. And he said, I stuttered. And he said, when I came to the knowledge of Christ when I was a teenager, he said, I told God two things. Well, he said, I didn't tell him, but I asked him two things. He said, please help me not stutter. And if you will make me smart, I will give you all the glory through everything that I write or everything that I do. What did that tell me? Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter what barrier you might think that is in your way. That God can use ordinary people just like each one of you in here to do extraordinary things for Him in your life if you'll just surrender to Him. So, you know what? I've always remembered that. Dr. Geisler's a great guy. He's a great mentor. He treated everybody the same. Didn't matter who he was or who he was talking to. But tonight we were challenged in several different ways. First of all, if you're an unbeliever, you were challenged with the evidence of whether a God exists or not. In the coming days, chew upon this evidence. Roll it around in your mind. Think about it. Pray and ask God. Even though you might not think that He existed, say, hey, you know what? If you're really there, show me this is true. And allow yourself to examine the evidence. Christian, you know what? We're here to glorify Him, right? Our identity is in Him. If you're a Christian, you're either a son or daughter of Jesus Christ. Your destination is heaven. Hey, we've got we're victorious, right? We don't have to worry about it. So why are we afraid to sit down across from either our friends, our family, or whoever to have conversations like this? We're challenged tonight to know what we believe and why we believe it. Let me encourage you to dive deeper. Let me encourage you to read more on this. Whether that's through Frank's book, there's a number. J. Warner Wallace is a great one. He mentioned Greg Kukul with Tactics, great book. There's all kind of information out there. The challenge is this. Here's the challenge. Is this more important than this? Is this more important than sports? Is this more important than a lot of different things? If it is, then you're going to learn more about this. We know everything about computers and phones, right? That's the only things we read instructions on a lot of time. So why don't we read up on things like this? Because if we realize that our worth and our value is in Jesus Christ, why would we not talk to other people about Him? So you know what? There's the challenge tonight. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming here, for being a part of this. And I just want to invite you back on a Sunday morning, 10:30. We got Sunday school at 9:15. We got service at 10:30. Come on back and learn with us. Dive a little bit deeper. I'm not trying to get you away from your church. If you don't have a church home, come. If you're searching for answers, come. Because I incorporate a lot of this stuff in my sermons. So I trust that you'll go home tonight that you'll think about it, and that you'll take up that challenge. Will y'all, I know y'all want to get up and kind of stretch a little bit. I know it's been a long evening, but would you just get up with me, and we're going to dismiss in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this time together. We just thank you, Lord, for your ambassador, Dr. Frank Turek. Thank you, Lord, for the challenge that he presented to us this day. I just ask, Lord, that you would just allow us to take up that challenge, to stand firm, to stand up, and to stand firm in Christ Jesus. Lord, it's a battle every time we walk out the doors. We're in a battle, whether we know it or not. Father, let us suit up and let us be the light and the salt that you called us to be. Father, I pray for each one here. I pray that as they leave this place that you'll watch over and protect them as they all go their separate ways. And I pray, Lord, for the opportunity of an open door even tomorrow, no matter where they're at, work, school, gas station, supermarket, that, Lord, you would open a door for them to be able to talk to somebody tomorrow about what we have heard tonight. So, Lord, we just ask that you would just help us. Forgive us where we failed you. Thank you, Lord, for your Son, Jesus, who died on the cross and shed his blood for us and was buried, and 3 days later rose again so we can have victory. Lord, allow us just to surrender to you so that you can use us to further your kingdom. And for that, we'll thank you. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you all.